Welcome to Fanfiction Audiobooks. Marvel's Planeswalkers. Chapter 81. Chapter 81. Dementors are very well behaved. That night, Snape came to the secret room with a cauldron and a bunch of potion introductory materials. He looked at Kreaker, who was busy in the secret room, and looked at Lupin, who was instructing Li Feng's magic with an unhappy expression. Seeing Snape's arrival, Li Feng happily put away his magic and put down his wand, stepped forward to perform the wizard's salute, and said, "Good evening, Professor Snape." Snape nodded slightly in response to Li Feng's greetings. He came to be a private professor and could afford Li Feng's wizarding ceremony. Snape looked at Lupin with a heavy look of disdain. This guy was one of the people he had been unhappy with since his school days. It would have been nice if he didn't pull out his wand and give him a swoon as soon as they met. "Want to say hello? How can it be?" Frowning, Snape said in a tone that sounded arrogant to Li Feng, "It seems that I came at the wrong time. Maybe we need to make an appointment at another time." Although he knew that Liu Ping had been teaching Li Feng magic in the secret room recently, he never expected that he was still in the secret room at this time. He thought that after agreeing on the teaching time with Li Feng, Liu Ping would voluntarily leave. Lupin, on the other hand, was the same. He didn't look at Snape with any kind eyes, and he also neither saluted nor greeted him. However, unlike Snape, he had long known that the other party would come to the secret room to teach Li Feng about potions at night, and he also knew that Li Feng was going to learn from the two of them at the same time, so he ignored Snape's words and told Li Feng said, "I hope you have enough energy to spend the summer vacation." After saying that, he walked to a corner by himself, playing with the puppet target used in magic practice and waiting for Li Feng to come over. Li Feng shrugged. Energy and other issues were too easy for him to solve. As long as he had enough magic power and released a restore physical strength, all problems would be solved. Not to mention taking 2 classes at the same time, Li Feng said that he could handle having 10 professors at the same time. Li Feng made a please gesture towards Snape, gesturing for him to enter the tent. At the same time, Li Feng took off the time turner from his neck. Snape understood what Li Feng was going to do when he saw the time turner, and also understood why Liu Ping still didn't leave after seeing the crucible and materials in his hands. Li Feng, who had the time turner, could indeed send 2 people to him at the same time. Capital for learning. Snape didn't talk nonsense. After entering the tent, he directly asked Li Feng to start the actual operation, while he played the role of venomous tongue next to Li Feng. "Idiot, the textbook says distilled water, and why are you pouring boiled water in? Do you have the brain of a troll? You can clearly see that the stirring is 3.5 times clockwise, 3.5 times. Is the half circle of your clock at an angle of more than 180 degrees? An hour later, Li Feng innocently looked at a bubbling and pungent-smelling unknown liquid in the crucible. Snape, on the other hand, covered his mouth and nose, standing behind Li Feng as if he was afraid of being poisoned by the unknown liquid. In fact, Snape understood that this was Li Feng's first time brewing a potion. It was good that the pot didn't explode during the process. After all, no one was born with the ability to brew a potion. Li Feng could brew a potion for the first time. It's already pretty good to have achieved what we have achieved now. Snape glanced at the piles of materials stored in the open suitcase, took out a parchment roll from his pocket and handed it to Li Feng. He prepared to walk out of the tent without packing the cauldron, and said, "That's it for today's teaching. Now that you have taken notes, practice more by yourself, since you have more potion ingredients than you can hold." Before leaving, Snape did not forget to restrain his venomous tongue and said with a regretful expression, "It's a pity that you have so many medicinal materials in your hands." Li Feng, who ignored the venomous tongue, was stunned for a moment when he took the parchment. Then he thought of what was recorded on the parchment and shouted excitedly, "Kreaker, help me deliver Professor Snape." After shouting, Li Feng leaned in front of the desk with a grin on his face and copied the formula of the magic power amplifying potion into the magic book. Considering that the same medicinal material has different names in different worlds, or that medicinal materials with the same effect have different appearances in other worlds, Li Feng rummaged through the information while marking the growth environment and medicinal properties of the medicinal materials to prevent him from traveling to other places. The world misses alternatives as it searches for medicinal herbs. Not long after Snape left, Lupin also finished his teaching for the day. After walking into the tent, he took out a letter from his pocket and handed it to Li Feng, saying, "Remember Jinny Wei, who was captured by the basilisk in the secret room?" Sly. Li Feng felt that he was a little confused by the question. Harry's wife, Of course I remember it. Nodding, Li Feng signaled Liu Ping to continue. Lupin pointed to the letter and said, "The little girl's family thanks you for saving their daughter and wants to invite you, Snape and Professor McGonagall to their home. But maybe Merlin's experience when he saw Ginny was too pitiful. Give them a grand prize and let the Weasley family travel to Egypt this year to relax, so we can only schedule the invitation a few days before the start of Hogwarts." Professor McGonagall rejected the invitation of the Weasley family on the grounds of welcoming new students. After all, those little wizards whose parents are muggles need Professor McGonagall to personally go and explain the Hogwarts admission notice, otherwise it will be very difficult. It might be regarded as a prank by those muggles. As for Snape, I probably won't go. From what I know about him, that guy would rather stay in front of the cauldron and smell the pungent smell of potion than go to Weasley. A guest at home. By the way, the Weasley family is very enthusiastic, you will like them. After saying this, Lupin said with a bit of helplessness on his face, Pettigrew will also travel to Egypt with the Weasley family. In order to prevent him from traveling halfway after escaping abroad, our original plan to capture Pettigrew during the summer vacation can only be adjusted. It is expected that we will not start until next year after the basilisk incident subsides. Li Feng feels that this world is really powerful in correcting the plot, so he can get back to the plot. Li Feng nodded and said that he would definitely go then. After all, the food he eats every day is brought by Kriaker from the kitchen of Hogwarts. Why refuse if he can change the taste? Moreover, he could also ask Weasley about the flying car to see the difference between his and Sirius's magic modification technology. If there was a chance, Li Feng would also like to chat with Pettigrew alone to see if he could learn from it. The other party got the magic that blew up half the street. After finishing the matter, Li Feng, who was about to continue copying the properties of the medicinal materials in the magic power amplifying potion, saw Liu Ping standing nervously in front of the desk, looking like he wanted to say something but didn't know how to say it. Li Feng asked curiously, "If you have anything to say, just tell me. It's not the first day we've met, I will definitely help you if I can." Lupin rolled his eyes, "You will help, but can you not ask for benefits? The Ministry of Magic has issued a wanted order. They sent Dementors to hunt down Sirius and allowed the Dementors to perform the Dementors' kiss after meeting Sirius." Seeing that Liu Ping didn't continue, Li Feng felt a little confused and asked, "Just chase the Dementors? Are you afraid that the brainless Dementors will catch Sirius? If you are worried about an accident, let Sirius hide. It'll be fine at Black's old house. Sirius will be fine after you capture Pettigrew next year." Speaking of this, Li Feng suddenly thought of something and said with a smile, "You don't think the Dementors can find the Black Mansion, do you? Don't worry, my Dementors are very well behaved. Even if they find the Black Mansion, I will let them. I didn't see it, how about it? Dementors are well behaved? That's for you, and for others, haha, it's pretty much the same for people to hate ghosts." Liu Ping shook his head speechlessly, and his mind suddenly recalled the time when Li Feng said with certainty that Sirius would teach him how to modify the engine of the Phetian car. Now he knew why. He had already inquired from the Ministry of Magic, which concluded that Sirius fled to hunt down Harry. It could be said that wherever Harry appeared, Dementors would appear. It is summer vacation time now, and Harry has long returned to the Muggle world. Dementors are controlled by the Ministry of Magic and will only appear in the streets where wizards gather. However, once school starts, the Dementors who captured Sirius will definitely appear in magic. Haunted around the campus under the instruction of the Ministry of Education. And what is the difference between Hogwarts, which is full of happiness, and a sweet cake to the Dementors? Can those Dementors with almost no self-control resist their desire to suck happiness? In this regard, Lupin said that believing that Dementors can restrain their instincts is not as convincing as believing that Dementors are holy creatures. Lupin took a deep breath and exhaled slowly, and said bitterly, "I am not worried about the threat posed by the Dementors to Sirius, but I am worried that in order to hunt down Sirius, the Ministry of Magic ordered the Dementors to get too close to Harry, causing Harry to I'm hurt, so I want to talk to you about whether you can keep the Dementors away from Harry." Hearing this, Li Feng had an inexplicable but unexplainable feeling in his heart. In the original work, the Dementors did have a great impression on Harry. How come I, the Dementor, was ordered to stay away from Harry before he even appeared on the scene? Touching his chin, Li Feng summoned the leader of the Dementors to meet him outside Hogwarts and said, "What did Sirius say?" While Liu Ping lamented that people who can see the future through time are naive, he looked at Li Feng with a smile and said, "Don't you already know the answer?" And this is also Sirius's request. He is willing to teach you how to modify the engine. Li Feng stood up and shrank the magic book and put it back in his pocket. He stretched out his hand to open a portal and said, "As you can see, I have been practicing brewing potions recently, so I need some gold galleons to buy materials." "You see?" Lupin said without thinking, "Okay." Li Feng never thought about asking for small money from Lupin or Sirius from the beginning. Instead, he targeted Harry, who made Harry related to Dementors, and he was also a wealthy N-generation, so Lupin was quick to do so. Li Feng was stunned by the answer and asked curiously, "Are you rich?" Lu Peng, who followed Li Feng through the portal, spread his hands and said, "I have no money, but Sirius has money." "Still have money? Didn't I empty out all the gold gallons?" Could it be that Sirius risked his way into Gringotts to withdraw money in front of a wanted criminal? This is a matter of money rather than life. Lu Ping saw what Li Feng was thinking and smiled. "When do you think the Black Old House was built? How does it compare with the time when the Black family existed? Do you think those families with ancient inheritances really put all their assets together? They know better than you about not putting all their eggs in the same basket." Li Feng, who came outside the campus, squinted his eyes and touched his chin, wondering when he was gathering some Black family wool. Chapter 82 Wang Ke. In the Forbidden Forest of Hogwarts, Li Feng was chatting with Lupin while waiting for the leader of the Dementors to arrive. After a while, the two saw a black shadow flying quickly towards them in midair in the distance. As the black shadow suddenly stopped in front of Li Feng and bowed humbly to Li Feng, the two of them suddenly felt a chill sweeping through their bodies. Immediately, they each showed their magical powers to protect themselves from the Dementors' close approach and be affected. Li Feng glanced at the wild flowers that quickly formed frost and withered beside the Dementor, and then looked at Lu Ping, who stood calmly in front of the Dementor. Li Feng was a little curious. He was not afraid of the Dementors because they were originally his slaves. He had taught him a lesson when he conquered them, so now they did not dare to show their teeth to him and would only try their best to restrain their desire to suck the happiness in the air. Otherwise Li Feng wouldn't mind asking the other party to recall painful memories. In addition, Li Feng was able to stay with the Dementors for a short period of time, so he could ignore the Dementors' innate abilities, but how did Lu Ping do it? Lu Ping saw Li Feng's curiosity, rolled up his sleeves and let Li Feng take a look at the strange patterns on his arms, and said, "Do you remember those spells to restrain Wolfsbane? Dumbledore helped me improve it and used rune characters to make them look like it's like a tattoo on my body, so now." The corners of Lupin's mouth raised slightly, and he couldn't help but have an excited smile on his face, and said, "So now, in addition to being weaker on full moon nights, I can also choose whether to become a werewolf. At the same time, these things have been changed by Dumbledore. The modified tattoo allows me to ignore the approach of some creatures with twisted minds for a short period of time. Unfortunately, Dementors are one of the creatures with twisted minds." Li Feng scratched his head, looked at the rune text on Lupin's arm, and asked doubtfully, "Since these spells can help you not be afraid of Dementors, why are you looking for me? It can't be done directly on Harry. Isn't it just a matter of describing something?" Lu Ping shook his head and reluctantly opened his collar, revealing the rune tattoo on his chest, and said, "Do you think you can restrain Wolfsbane just by tattooing it on your arm? You're wrong, I have rune tattooed almost all over my body. Text, and there are many shortcomings in having rune text written on the body. First of all, this is a spell to restrain Wolfsbane. The function of not being afraid of Dementors is just incidental. Secondly, in order for the rune text to exert its proper effect, it needs itself to provide the source of magic power, and Harry is just a child. There is not enough magic power for these runes to be as effective as they should be. Even if the spells are engraved on the tools for Harry to use, Harry will only be able to defend against Dementors for a short time due to Harry's magic power problem. It's terrible. Harry will also exhaust his magic power due to the use of props and completely lose his ability to defend himself." Finally, Lupin said quietly, "Harry is still a child, and he is still a child who has reached a stage of extremely rapid development. Can you imagine that today I have carved these spells, and next month, because Harry has grown taller or fatter? Are the rune characters deformed? Do the deformed rune characters still have magical effects? So these spells written as rune characters are not worth the gain." Li Feng nodded suddenly to show that he understood. "Let's just say that Harry's current strength is not enough. Even if he picks up the artifact, he still won't be able to exert the power that the artifact should have." "You are right to understand that, Liu Ping, who was standing next to the Dementor and explaining to Li Feng, buttoned up his collar, rubbed his hands that were starting to get cold, and handed over a strand of hair that he got from nowhere. To Li Feng, look to the side and be cute? Or the Dementor, who consciously positioned himself as a slave, said, can we solve the Dementor problem first? I can't help but give this guy a calling God's guard. Dementors have no eyes, and the only way they can identify creatures is through smell and emotion, so without Liu Ping's explanation, Li Feng already understood that the owner of this strand of hair must be Harry. Li Feng took the hair and turned around and handed it to the Dementor. He looked at Liu Ping with disdain and said, "Tch, I thought the short time in your mouth was long, but the Dementor made him tremble in 3 seconds? Do you think you are a real man in 3 seconds? Liu Ping was stunned. Although he didn't understand what 3 seconds of real man meant, it was obvious that Li Feng was not praising him. Just when Liu Ping rolled his eyes at Li Feng, he saw that Li Feng was looking at the Dementors. A mouth that made no sound. In fact, that was Li Feng ordering the Dementors in the language of the dead, order your men not to approach or harm the owner of this smell. If you have no choice but to restrain your talents, leave the owner of this smell as soon as possible. The Dementor lowered his head and floated to Harry's hair and said, "Yes, my master." When the Dementors were sniffing Harry's hair, a bold idea suddenly came to Li Feng's mind, and he said to Lupin half jokingly and half seriously, "You said I asked the Dementors to wear a quick sign around my neck when they searched for Sirius from house to house, stating that as long as you pay, you won't enter the house to search. How much money do you think I can make?" Liu Ping stared at Li Feng, who was speechless, and said, "How did you come up with such a shameless operation in your head? I don't know how much money you can make. I only know that once you are beaten by someone, knowing that the Dementors are under your control, you will never be able to go out on the streets in this life, just spit will drown you." Li Feng scratched his head. He thought this method was quite good. As for being discovered by others in the future, he had not thought about it. Li Feng was not prepared to spend his whole life in this world, going out on the streets and so on. He only wanted to learn magic. It's too far away for Li Feng. If he has that time, he might as well think about how to improve his strength. But Dumbledore is a big problem. How about I rob the Death Eaters? The more he thought about it, the more reasonable he felt. Li Feng touched his chin thoughtfully. These are not Dementors who hate ghosts. These are my personal gold-making group. Lupin, what do you think about me letting the Dementors break into the Death Eaters' homes and conduct a house raid? If Li Feng wanted to loot the magical world with the help of unkillable Dementors, Liu Ping would immediately notify Dumbledore and ask Old Deng to come over and kill Li Feng. However, Li Feng had always been consistent with the Death Eaters if he only targeted Death Eaters. Lupin, who didn't want to deal with it, grinned and said, "Do you need help?" Although there are a lot of Death Eaters in the movie, Li Feng really remembers a few of them. Hearing Liu Ping speak, Li Feng smiled and said, "Of course, I need a list. You are responsible for collecting the hair of these people and give your hair to Wang Ke. Yes, this Dementor leader will be called Wang Ke from now on, and let Wang Ke take care of the rest. Don't worry, I'll definitely give you a reward afterwards." Wang Ke. Liu Ping looked at the prosperous wealth that was about to bring him wealth with twitching lips, and said, "It's not just money, there are all kinds of potions and magical knowledge. The members of the Death Eaters have been passed down for hundreds of years. Or a 1,000-year-old pure-blood family, their collections are all good things not to be missed." Lupin paused for a moment, as if he was planning something, and said, "The plan of hanging signs around the Dementors' necks should be changed. We need a more covered method to empty their assets." When he said empty, Liu Ping looked at him with a half-smile. And Li Feng said that he understood instantly and had rich experience. Liu Ping wanted nothing more than to use Dementors to break into the Death Eaters' homes, and rely on his talent to absorb happiness to force these people to leave the room, so that Li Feng could open the portal and move away the good things he liked, just like Li Feng went to the basement of Blake's old house and emptied out the gold galleons. As for these people's god-calling guards, Li Feng said that there is no problem that this group of Dementors cannot solve. If there is, it means that the number of Dementors is not enough and a group of Dementors is needed. Li Feng does not believe that hundreds of Dementors can attack each other. Entering these Death Eaters' homes, they would probably be so scared that they wouldn't even fart. How dare they fart? You don't even need Dementors to absorb the happiness around you, you can squeeze the Death Eaters out of your home just by their numbers. At this time, Wang Ke, who remembered Harry's scent, lowered his head and took a few steps back, preparing to pass Li Feng's order to the other Dementors. Li Feng, who shook hands with Lu Ping and concluded the deal, turned to Wang Ke and said, "It's inappropriate to call you Dementor all the time. From now on, your name will be Wang Ke. I'll ask Lu Ping to contact you in a few days. Remember, this mission is very important, if you fail it." With a gloomy face, Li Feng said word by word, "Just let your tribe choose a leader." Wang Ke, who was unable to resist, either because he was fooled by Wang Ke's name or because he was afraid of Li Feng's threat, nodded tremblingly and turned around to float away. Lu Ping looked at Li Feng as if he had transformed into a big devil, and felt that the kind Wang Ke was aggrieved and ran away for his life. He felt a lot in his heart, but for a moment he didn't know what to say. Is this a Dementor? He. Lu Ping shook his head to get rid of the thoughts in his mind, said goodbye to Li Feng, turned into a black mist, and left using phantom movement. Watching Lu Ping leave, Li Feng was a little envious because he hadn't learned how to phantom yet. During the summer vacation at Hogwarts, Li Feng spent his time brewing potions and learning magic. The start of Hogwarts also marks the end of Snape's potions teaching time. The rest is left to Li Feng to teach himself. Fortunately, the basic operation of potions has been learned with Snape's help. Li Feng has to learn it's nothing more than practicing, or burning money. Lupin's teaching time also ended. After all, he was the defense against the dark arts professor at Hogwarts since school started, and he didn't have much time to continue teaching Li Feng. Li Feng expressed his dissatisfaction with this. Even though Lupin said he didn't have time, he didn't want to protect Harry in the school while giving him a chance to monitor Pettigrew. This was the time spent teaching Li Feng to teach Harry. It was no wonder that Li Feng was in a happy mood. The day before the start of school, Li Feng specifically asked Kriaker to select a few gifts from a pile of items robbed from Death Eaters' homes, which were prepared for dinner at the Weasleys' house. As night fell, Li Feng carried a dry shoulder bag and opened the portal to the Broken Axe Bar. As soon as he stepped through the portal, Li Feng saw a little boy wearing glasses staring at him and the portal behind him in shock. Chapter 83 Harry. Li Feng, who felt that the little boy in front of him looked familiar, subconsciously asked, "Harry Potter, who survived?" The little boy curiously looked at the portal and the secret room behind the portal, nodded and admitted that he was the world's best cheater. Although he knew that he was in a magical world and could see all kinds of magic, Harry was still curious about this swirling orange light door. Especially when Harry saw Li Feng walking out of the portal with his own eyes, he understood that this was a kind of space magic. Harry said that he also wanted to learn it. Once he learned it, he would not have to be locked in a small room all day during the holidays. You can go out and hang out whenever you want. How cool it is! Good evening, sir. What kind of magic is this? Is it in the textbook? Li Feng shrugged his shoulders and said with a smile, "There is no content about portals in the textbooks. This is my unique spell." After thinking about it, Li Feng added, "Professor McGonagall can do it, and probably Dumbledore can too." Although in Li Feng's eyes, Harry is a mobile galleons, after this period of time when he ransacked several Death Eater families almost like ransacking their homes, Li Feng, who only had galleons and no change in his pocket, said that he was not short of money, nor was he short of money. Knowledge, so the portal spell that Harry was curious about and longed for could only be thought about in his mind. Li Feng had no interest in teaching magic to the little kid. After briefly exchanging names with Harry as a greeting, Li Feng walked straight to the bar, put his shoulder bag aside, and said to the bar owner who was wiping the wine glass, "Tom, a glass of mead, and I can borrow your fireplace by the way, I'm going to visit Mr. Weasley's house." "Mr. Austen, long time no see," Tom said while pouring a glass of mead from the barrel, "I still remember that you came to the bar to stay in embarrassment, but looking at you now, I think you've been here recently." "Nice, met new friends in London." "That's right, at least you've settled down now." Li Feng took the mead and shrugged, "How's business lately?" After speaking, Li Feng took a sip of the slightly sweet honey wine in his hand. The alcohol content of mead is not as high as Li Feng imagined, but Li Feng didn't dare to pour it into his mouth. These sweet wines have one characteristic, that is, when you feel that they taste good, you will not get drunk. Prepare to have one drink after another and you'll be drunk before you know it. Tom glanced at the few drinkers in the bar, pointed to the wanted portraits of Sirius on the surrounding walls, sighed and said, "What can we do? It's all the fault of the damn Sirius and the Dementors. Everyone likes to hide at home now, for fear that the valuable things in their home will be stolen by Dementors." I just don't understand. What do the Dementors want with those things? Do they still want to come to my place for a drink with a bunch of gold galleons? I will not entertain these evil creatures. Li Feng grinned. He didn't want to express any random opinions on this matter. After all, the biggest black hand was himself. To say that the Dementors stole things was simply because they were hit by a big pot flying from the sky. Their real job was just to drive the residents out of the house. The rest were Li Feng, Liu Ping, and the little moldy kid who stayed at home. Serious, the three of them searched the Death Eater's house frantically for all the items they wanted. I don't know if Lupin deliberately selected those wealthy families from the list of Death Eaters or something. Anyway, Li Feng is now extremely rich, whether it is gold galleons, magic books, or props and potions. On the side, Harry, who was about to have some dinner, heard that Li Feng was about to go to the Weasley house. He looked at Li Feng with a foreign face in surprise, and then looked at the wine glass in Li Feng's hand, thinking, idleness is also idle. Maybe I could hang out at Ron's house? After Mr. Austen finished drinking, we happened to go to Ron's house together to give him a surprise. After a while, Li Feng, who was listening to Tom's nagging, drank a glass of mead, said goodbye to Tom, picked up his shoulder bag and walked towards the fireplace. Just when Li Feng was about to grab the splitting powder, he heard Harry's voice coming from behind him, Mr. Austen. Li Feng turned around in confusion and asked, Mr. Potter? Do you have anything to do with me? Harry glanced at the flow of powder. He had used this thing before and was teleported to Nocturne Alley because he couldn't speak clearly. If he hadn't been lucky enough to meet Hagrid, he would probably have lost his temper. It was also that encounter that made Harry gave flow of powder a bad review. I just stayed in the room bored on one side, and went to Ron's house for a carnival on the last night of the holiday. How would a 13-year-old boy choose? You can guess it with your toes, and besides, Harry is not an honest child. Harry, I happen to be going to Weasley's house, shall we go together? Li Feng raised his eyebrows. He knew that even though Harry lived in the Broken Axe bar and could come and go freely in the room, it was actually correct to say that he was under house arrest in the bar. He didn't believe that Harry had not been warned not to appear on the street, so as not to be killed by Sirius. Although Sirius couldn't draw a knife and could only give Harry a big hug, others didn't know that. After thinking about it, Li Feng felt that at this moment, the drunkard squatting in any corner might be the person sent by the Ministry of Magic to monitor Harry. As an unknown person who didn't even have identification, Li Feng didn't want to cause trouble for himself. What's more, now that Sirius knows that Pettigrew is at the Weasley house, Li Feng is taking Harry to the Weasley house as a guest. It is estimated that Sirius and Lupin will dare to break into Mr. Weasley's house in the next second. Li Feng grabbed the flow of powder beside him and said with a fake apology on his face, I'm sorry, I think it would be safer for you to stay in the room. Before Li Feng finished speaking, Harry quickly grabbed the flow of powder and rushed into the fireplace, throwing down the flow as he called out Weasley's address. Li Feng watched silently as the green flames suddenly ignited in the fireplace, and then Harry's figure disappeared in front of him. Okay, I forgot that this is a naughty kid. Li Feng turned to look at Tom, whose expression was frozen. He spread his hands innocently and said, Can I be said to be worthy of being the Seeker in Quidditch? With this speed and agility, I can't stop him. Tom's eyes twitched slightly, and he put down the wine glass in his hand, which Li Feng seemed to be unable to clean, and ran to the bar building in a panic. It seemed that there was some big shot living on the second floor who could solve the trouble caused by Harry's private outing. Li Feng scratched his head. He didn't understand what Tom wanted to do, so he just grabbed the fluff powder and walked into the fireplace. When Li Feng came to Weasley's house in disgrace, he had already expressed no love for all the teleportation methods in this world. Is there no normal teleportation method? What's wrong with this body covered in ash, which seems even more inhuman than the Black State? Before Li Feng could take out his wand and give himself a clean-up, Arthur Weasley, who had been standing by the fireplace, smiled and stretched out his right hand to shake hands with the Asian-faced Li Feng and said, Good evening, I think you must it's Mr. Austen, both Ginny and Dumbledore told me that you are an Asian travelling to London. Good evening Mr. Arthur Weasley, I'm glad to receive your invitation. Li Feng, who had used magic to clean himself up, shook hands with Arthur Weasley and said with a smile, Yes, I like to talk to you. Corner Alley, the products there make me want to go back. While speaking, Li Feng silently added in his heart, especially when I spend other people's money, it makes me linger even more. Li Feng turned around and looked around, and asked, "Mr. Weasley, have you seen Mr. Potter? He used flow powder one step faster than me. I hope he doesn't go to other places." Weasley pointed upstairs with a nervous expression and said, "He is changing clothes upstairs. To be honest, I didn't expect Harry to dare to go out when the situation is so tense." Weasley motioned to Li Feng to order a pre-dinner drink in a nearby restaurant, and said, "I have informed Dumbledore that Harry is at my house, and I will ensure his safety until he boards the boat to Hogwarts Express." As soon as Weasley handed the wine glass to Li Feng heard Mrs. Weasley's nervous but joyful voice from upstairs, "Don't worry Harry, you will be safe in my house, Sirius can't hurt you." At this time, Harry's knowledge of Sirius was limited to the fact that he was a murderer who escaped from Azkaban. He didn't understand why Mrs. Weasley mentioned that Sirius wanted to hurt him, and he looked confused. Asked, "Mrs. Weasley, who is Sirius and what does it have to do with me?" In the restaurant, when Weasley heard his wife telling Harry who Sirius was and why she wanted to hunt Harry down, Weasley awkwardly explained to Li Feng, "Although the Ministry of Magic objects to me revealing some things to Harry, but I think as a client, we have the right to understand our own situation." Li Feng nodded to express his understanding and said, "This can also make Harry more alert to prevent being attacked by Sirius. But in his heart, I bet you a dime that Sirius will only be affectionate. Look at Harry." After a while, Mrs. Weasley came downstairs with a group of children. Li Feng stood up politely and said, "Good evening, Mrs. Weasley. I'm glad to taste your delicious food." "Good evening Mr. Austen, welcome to my home," Mrs. Weasley said apologetically to Li Feng while letting the children sit at the dining table. "I'm sorry to keep you waiting, dinner is ready." After saying that, Mrs. Weasley waved her magic wand, and the delicious food she had cooked earlier floated to the table. Seeing that the food was on the table, Weasley picked up the wine glass, looked at Li Feng and said, "Thank you for saving Ginny. This is what I should do." As he spoke, Li Feng opened his dry shoulder bag and took out gifts one after another, preparing to distribute them to Weasley's children. Except for Harry, everyone in Weasley's family received one. Gifts, there was nothing he could do about it. Li Feng didn't know that Harry would come, so it was normal that he didn't prepare gifts. Harry looked at the shoulder bag with some curiosity. It was obviously a flat bag, but why did he take out so many gifts like it was a bottomless pit? "You know, there are quite a few Weasley children." Ron, who received the gift, saw Harry's curiosity. While holding Pettigrew, he whispered in Harry's ear, "That's a backpack with a traceless telescopic charm." Ginny took the gift at the signal of her parents, said thank you, and looked at young Li Feng with curiosity. When she was in the secret room, she saw with her own eyes Li Feng opening and closing the portal and the mirror space with his bare hands. Being born in the magical world, she understood how difficult it was for a wizard to achieve wandless release, and this young guy in front of her, but can release magic effortlessly with a wave of his hand. Chapter 84 Plot? What the hell? Thanks to Silly Fantasy for the support and reward. Dinner was held in a pleasant atmosphere. During the dinner, Li Feng and Weasley drank wine and brought the topic to flying cars. Although Weasley worked in the Ministry of Magic's Muggle Artifacts department, he liked anything related to Muggles and was very interested in Muggle technology. He would buy some technological products and disassemble them in his own shed for research. Sometimes he would cast magic on them, including a car that could fly and become invisible after being cast. Li Feng was most interested in the magic that allowed the car to drive automatically. Weasley heard that Li Feng was very interested in his magic-modified car. He was a little hesitant when answering Li Feng's questions at first, until he glanced at his wife. Mrs. Weasley, who had always opposed Weasley's magic-modified car, may have been grateful to Li Feng for saving her baby daughter, or she felt that the flying car had been wandering in the Forbidden Forest of Hogwarts last summer and had nothing to do with Weasley at all, so she did not stop the excited Weasley from talking about how he modified the flying car. Seeing that Mrs. Weasley had no clear objection, Weasley could not help showing off his skills to Li Feng. Under Li Feng's guidance, Weasley even explained in detail his magic modification ideas and specific operations. This made Li Feng feel that this trip was not in vain. At least after returning to the Marvel Universe, he could sleep in the RV while letting the RV drive automatically to avoid being accidentally hit by shells or accidentally hitting an airplane when the RV was resting in the air, especially an airplane, which Li Feng said he could not afford to pay for. At the end of dinner, Li Feng and Weasley were already drunk, and the two began to call each other brothers with their arms around each other. On the side, Ginny saw her mother busy tidying up the table and her brothers opening the gifts brought by Li Feng. She walked to Li Feng with curiosity, ready to ask about the doubts in her heart, and said, "Mr. Austen, thank you for saving my life." Li Feng felt someone calling him. Opened his drunken eyes, looked at Ginny with confusion, and when he saw that it was Ginny calling him, he smiled and said, "Ha, it's you, little Lolita, I remember you are Harry's wife, Ginny Potter, right?" As soon as Li Feng said this, except for Weasley who was also drunk, no one reacted. Harry and Ginny blushed and looked down at the pattern on the floor, and the rest of the people looked at Li Feng who was grinning. From the bottom of her heart, Mrs. Weasley liked Harry very much. If Ginny was an adult, she would not mind Austen's drunken talk, but the problem was how old Ginny was now. She was only a 12-year-old child. Wasn't it too early to talk about marriage? If Li Feng hadn't been a guest she had invited, Mrs. Weasley really wanted to have a good talk with Li Feng with a broom. What kind of jokes shouldn't be made in front of children, which would cause unnecessary trouble? Although Ron and Harry were good friends, he couldn't accept the thought of his sister becoming his brother's wife. He subconsciously looked at Harry and retorted, "This is impossible." Mrs. Weasley nodded in response to Ron's question and said, "Mr. Austen is drunk and he is talking nonsense." Harry felt that he had suffered an unprovoked disaster. He just wanted to take advantage of the last day of the holiday to have a carnival. He had no other ideas. Marrying a wife was a bit far away for him. Alcohol will inhibit the cerebral cortex, allowing oneself to relax, or naturally release one's suppressed emotions on a daily basis. Some people will be in an excited state, showing a lot of talk, like to speak the truth after drinking, love to recall the past, and be impulsive. Unfortunately, Li Feng, who was drunk, was in an excited and talkative state. So when Li Feng, who was slumped in the chair, saw everyone's disbelief, he had only one thought in his drunken mind: how can I, a time traveler, deceive you little brats? Especially the way you look at me makes me very upset. As for the plot? What is that? Don't believe it? Let me tell you, I know a lot of things, more than you can imagine, such as…" Li Feng said while snapping his fingers to cast the mirror space. When everyone heard the sound of glass breaking around them and saw the crystal wall of the space around them, Li Feng staggered to Ron and walked to him, pointing at the field mouse in Ron's arms and scolding, "Bold monster, why don't you show up in front of this master?" "Ron, damn, this guy possessed by a giant monster saved my sister? I don't believe it. There must be something wrong with some link." Petty. When Mrs. Weasley saw Li Feng start to get drunk and yell at her children, she glanced at Weasley who was drunk on the dining table with a bad look. "If you can still sleep at this time, don't even think about climbing into my bed in this life." There was no other way. Since the head of the family was too drunk to get up, Mrs. Weasley could only stand up to protect Ron and said, "Mr. Austen, this joke is not funny at all. I ask you to apologize to Ron after you sober up. He is my son, not a monster." Li Feng scratched his head in confusion at first. Fortunately, his only ability to think made him immediately realize that Mrs. Weasley misunderstood what he meant. He pointed at the vole and said, "I didn't say Ron, I meant the fat vole. He was Peter Pettigrew. The hero who died 12 years ago? How is it possible?" Before Mrs. Weasley could refute, Li Feng held up a time-stopping spell that looked like a water ball in his right hand, and locked Pettigrew with his mental power, and said sternly, "Petty, do you want to become a roasted field mouse and be buried in the belly of an owl, or become a human and sleep in a grave?" If Mrs. Weasley hadn't protected Ron tightly behind her, Li Feng couldn't even hit Ron now, let alone hit Pettigrew. Otherwise, he really wanted to imprison Ron and Pettigrew in a spell of time stagnation. After all, it was just time stagnation, not a lethal spell. At most, he would apologize to Ron afterwards. As long as the gift was in place, any hatred could be resolved. Mrs. Weasley saw that Li Feng had neither a wand nor a spell when casting the spell, so she directly cast a ball of water. She regretted inviting Li Feng to her home. If possible, she really wanted to use the time converter to go back to the past and stop her past self from writing an invitation letter to Li Feng. If the time converter couldn't go back too far in the past, it would be fine to stop Li Feng from drinking, so that he wouldn't get drunk here. Seeing that Li Feng was holding up the water ball and looked like he would shoot it when he got the chance, Mrs. Weasley naturally drew out her wand and pointed it at Li Feng, protecting the panicked children behind her. Before Mrs. Weasley could warn Li Feng to remove the magic, Pettigrew in Ron's arms realized that his identity had been exposed. Especially when he saw that the drunk Li Feng had no mercy in his eyes, and was determined to catch him to prove that he was not lying. Pettigrew felt that if he didn't run away, he would be the owl's food. Who said that drunk people really couldn't communicate? Thinking of this, Pettigrew took a bite of Ron and hurriedly jumped to the ground to escape. It would be better if Pettigrew didn't leave Ron. Since the other party ran out of Mrs. Weasley's protection circle in a panic, Li Feng didn't know what politeness was. He grinned and shot the time spell in his hand at Pettigrew, who was locked by mental power. Just as the water ball wrapped Pettigrew and made him run on the floor like a fixed body, a portal suddenly appeared in front of everyone. Li Feng turned his head to look at Dumbledore, who walked out of the portal, smiled at Harry, and said, "See, I said Comrade Dumbledore also knows how to use the portal, I didn't lie to you." Mrs. Weasley was relieved to see that it was Dumbledore who came. Just as she was about to say something, she saw Dumbledore waved his hand and said, "I'll explain it to you later." After that, Dumbledore looked around the dwarf wrapped in the water with interest, and then looked at the surrounding space crystal wall. After a while, he smiled and said to Li Feng, "The perfect battle place, for those who can't open the portal. This is a sealed tomb. Even if you are killed, you cannot escape from this alien space. Also, I can't help but want to praise you. It's a very good time spell." Dumbledore blinked and asked curiously, "Are time and space your best spells?" Li Feng, who felt a little thirsty after drinking too much, grabbed the bottle of wine on the table and poured it into his mouth. When he heard Dumbledore praising him, he couldn't help but give Dumbledore a thumbs up, saying, "You have a good eye. Yes, time and space are one of my best spells." But before Li Feng put down the bottle, Li Feng, who had already drunk too much wine, and the wine he had just drunk to quench his thirst, caused the alcohol to quickly occupy his brain, and he collapsed to the ground without saying a word. Aside, Mrs. Weasley was full of doubts, especially when she knew that the water ball in Li Feng's hand was a time spell. She was so surprised that she couldn't close her mouth. She looked at Li Feng, who was snoring on the ground, as if she was looking at a monster. It's not that wizards in the magic world don't want to learn about time spells, but no one has heard of anyone who can control time. How can young Li Feng control time? Dumbledore, Mrs. Weasley looked at the field mouse that was about to break free from the time spell and asked, "What's going on?" Dumbledore sensed that the mirror space that had lost its mana due to Li Feng's drunkenness was about to break. He pulled out his wand to petrify Pettigrew, opened the portal and floated Weasley and Li Feng in the air, saying, "This is not a safe place. I'll explain it to you after leaving the mirror space." After everyone left the mirror space, Dumbledore waved his wand at Pettigrew and restored him to human form. Seeing the field mouse become a stranger made Mrs. Weasley a little confused. Although she couldn't recognize who the ragged guy in front of her was at a glance, everyone knew that this guy was an illegal animagus. Regardless of whether the guy in front of her was the Pettigrew mentioned by Li Feng, Mrs. Weasley felt a chill running down her spine just thinking about the fact that he had been hiding in her house for 12 years. You know, when humans do something embarrassing, they will subconsciously avoid children, but I have never heard of anyone avoiding a pet, so Mrs. Weasley, who felt her brain was about to explode, asked in shame and anger, "Dumbledore, for Merlin's sake, tell me what's going on." Dumbledore, who was sure that Pettigrew had been controlled, breathed a sigh of relief and smiled, "I will explain it to you now." Chapter 85 Chapter 85 It is indeed a rat spirit. In the early morning, when the hot summer sun shone on Li Feng's face through the glass window, Li Feng tried hard to open his eyelids but turned over to avoid the sun. Unfortunately, Li Feng, who was drunk and sleeping, forgot that he was not lying on his own bed at this time, but was placed on the sofa in the living room by Mrs. Weasley. Therefore, Li Feng's subconscious turning over caused him to fall directly to the ground, still facing his face. The kind of land. Li Feng, who fell down for no apparent reason, finally opened his eyelids, scratched his head and looked around while sighing. When he subconsciously prepared to ask Kriaker to pour him some water, the unfamiliar environment that caught his eye made him stunned, and he forcefully said the words calling Kriaker to him. "Swallow it back into your stomach. What's going on? Why am I still at Weasley's house?" Li Feng sat back on the sofa and rubbed his swollen head. After thinking for a long time, he didn't remember what he had experienced last night. He only knew that he was now weak and would die of thirst without drinking water. On the side, Mrs. Weasley, who had been busy with breakfast in the kitchen, saw Li Feng sitting on the sofa and rubbing his temples. She took out her wand and pointed at the teacup, letting the teacup float to Li Feng on its own. She said with a smile, "Mr. Austen, good morning." Li Feng took the teacup. said good morning and drank the warm water in the teacup. He stood up unsteadily and put the teacup on the dining table. He said with a confused face, Mrs. Weasley, yesterday I didn't say anything nonsense tonight, did I? Sorry, I either fall asleep or talk nonsense after drinking too much. I hope I didn't cause you any trouble. Mrs. West frowned and said with a smile, trouble? Maybe I should thank you for helping me solve the hidden dangers at home. Li Feng, who didn't understand what it meant, scratched his head and asked inexplicably, what did I do? Peter Pettigrew, Mrs. Weasley said as she handed a sandwich to Li Feng, I can't believe that my pet vole of 12 years is actually a murderer. I shudder when I think about it. As she spoke, Mrs. Weasley crossed her arms and rubbed her arms. Apparently, one night was not enough for her to recover from the incident. Li Feng was eating the sandwich while listening to Mrs. Weasley's intermittent description. When he stuffed the sandwich into his stomach, Li Feng understood what he had done last night. You mean Dumbledore took Pettigrew away? You also know that Sirius was wrongly accused, and Harry also knows that he has a godfather. Mrs. Weasley smiled and nodded. At this time, Li Feng felt his head hurt even more. Harry's plot this year is probably scrapped. It's okay. I didn't want to participate in it anyway, but why should I catch Pettigrew properly? Isn't it good to work quietly? It's good now. The magic that blew up half the street was released by me. After breakfast, Li Feng sat on the sofa with a cup of tea and a gloomy look on his face, reflecting that he shouldn't have messed up after drinking. In the kitchen, Mrs. Weasley accidentally saw Li Feng's back. She didn't know why, but a strange feeling suddenly appeared in her heart. Looking horizontally and vertically, she felt that there was an indescribable sense of desolation in Li Feng's back. Mrs. Weasley shook her head to get rid of this strange feeling, and shouted to the bedroom on the second floor, Weasley, children, get up and have breakfast quickly. We have to go to the Broken Axe Bar to get it later. Harry's textbook, if you get up too late you'll miss the Hogwarts train. Mrs. Weasley's loud voice also brought Li Feng back to his senses. He drank the tea in his hand and comforted himself helplessly, what else can I do now that Dumbledore has taken Pettigrew away? Come on, I'd better concentrate on practicing my fire calming spell. By the way, Harry World has to take that Hogwarts Express after all, right? Thinking of this, Li Feng rubbed his face and turned his unhappy expression into one of happiness. He stood up and put the teacup on the dining table and said, Mrs. Weasley, thank you for your hospitality. I'll take my leave now. Mrs. Weasley looked apologetic. She thought that it was not only Li Feng but also Weasley who got drunk last night. But now Li Feng as a guest is leaving, but her husband is still lying in bed and whining loudly. Sleeping, this is somewhat unjustifiable. I'll let Weasley see you off. After all, you're not familiar with London yet. Li Feng thought for a while, picked up his shoulder bag and said, thank you for your kindness. I will just use fluid to get to the Broken Axe Bar. You'd better let Mr. Weasley sleep a little longer. I hope he won't be there when he goes to work today. Well, cheer up. Mrs. Weasley thought for a while and felt that what Li Feng said was somewhat reasonable. After all, a hungover person without a good rest would not be able to work mentally. Now the family's income depends on Weasley, who works at the Ministry of Magic. If they were fired due to work mistakes due to poor rest, their family would be without food. Mrs. Weasley nodded slightly, apologetically signaling Li Feng to use fluid powder himself. Li Feng walked from the fireplace to the Broken Axe Bar, then to King's Cross Station via the night bus, and boarded the Hogwarts train across platform 9 3/4. Perhaps it was because Li Feng arrived a little early, and there were only a few students on the train. Li Feng, who was feeling sleepy, walked straight to the last carriage, preparing to find a compartment to relax for a while, and watch the scenery along the way while the train was moving. At this time, Lupin, who was about to go to Hogwarts to be the defense against the dark arts professor, happened to be in the last carriage. Liu Ping was a little surprised when he saw Li Feng. Before he could ask Li Feng why he chose to take the train instead of using the portal, Li Feng saw that Liu Ping, who had bags under his eyes and dark eyes like pandas, had already laughed out loud and said jokingly, You. What kind of look? It's very unique. If you weren't wearing clothes, I would have thought you were a panda that escaped from the zoo. Looking at Liu Ping who was still wearing patched clothes, Li Feng couldn't help but smile. You have made a lot of money recently, why are you reluctant to buy yourself some clothes? Or do you have any special hobbies? Wearing patched clothes. Liu Ping rolled his eyes at Li Feng, looked around, then opened an empty cubicle and motioned for Li Feng to enter the cubicle together to talk. Li Feng walked into the cubicle. Liu Ping closed the cubicle door and said with a shrug, "Everyone in the magic world knows that I am poor. Buying new clothes hastily will arouse unnecessary suspicion. I will wait until the Dementor stealing incident subsides. Buying some items." While sitting next to Li Feng, Liu Ping pointed to the dark circles on his face and said helplessly, "As for this, it's all thanks to you. I didn't have a rest all night." "Toss?" Li Feng twitched the corner of his mouth, waved his hand and said, "What you said is very ambiguous. I was drinking at the Weasley house last night, so don't blame everything on me." Liu Ping, who understood the meaning of Li Feng's words, pinched the bridge of his nose to relieve his fatigue, and said speechlessly, "Where are you thinking? I mean you caught Pettigrew." "I was busy in the old black house in the middle of the night last night." "Interrogate him. Did you ask anything?" Li Feng, who was feeling sleepy again, rubbed his temples and closed his eyes and said, "You must keep a close eye on Pettigrew. As far as I know, that guy is very cunning and can slip away as soon as he gets the chance." "Thank you for the reminder," Lupin said with a bitter and depressed look on his face. "In the early hours of the morning, Dumbledore returned to Hogwarts to welcome this year's freshman, but I didn't expect serious hatred for Pettigrew. The intention was so deep that when I was guarding Pettigrew in the middle of the night, Sirius actually found an excuse to trick me away and prepared to kill Pettigrew, but I don't know how Pettigrew did it. But he took the opportunity to run away. Considering that it is inconvenient for Sirius to appear on the street, I can only look for Pettigrew all over the world alone. It's a pity." There was no need for Liu Ping to continue talking. Li Feng had already guessed that the other party had not caught Pettigrew. He smacked his lips and sighed, as expected of a rat. This escape technique is, without a doubt, absolutely top-notch. Liu Ping shrugged awkwardly and helplessly, not knowing how to answer Li Feng's sigh. For a moment, neither of the two people in the carriage knew what to say. After a long sigh, Liu Ping put his coat in front of him as a quilt and leaned against the seat to catch up on his sleep. As for Pettigrew, what else can he do now? Are they complaining about Li Feng rashly sabotaging their previous plan to capture Pettigrew while also clearing Sirius of murder suspicion? This is too far-fetched. After all, Pettigrew escaped in their hands. Fortunately, after Lupin's interrogation, he was able to pry some evidence from Pettigrew's mouth, but before the evidence was collected, he could only force Sirius to stay in the old black house for a while. Seeing Liu Ping's attitude of wanting to sleep even if the sky fell, Li Feng guessed that the result of the other parties staying up late to interrogate was not in vain. After thinking about it, Li Feng followed Liu Ping's example and took out his coat from his shoulder bag to cover his head. Blocking his face from the dazzling sunlight, he leaned back on the chair and closed his eyes to sleep. On the other side, Mrs. Weasley brought a group of children to the Broken Axe bar, packed up the textbooks, changes of clothes and other items that Harry had left in the room, and hurried to Gia with Hermione, who had been waiting for everyone in the bar. On the fourth platform, the children were put on the train almost in time for the train to start. On the train, the iron triangle formed by Harry, Ron, and Hermione looked at the compartments they passed by that were either full of people or with only 1 or 2 seats. They had no choice but to continue looking for a compartment that could accommodate 3 people. After a while, the 3 people walked to the compartment where Li Feng and Liu Ping slept, and looked at the 2 people sleeping side by side. The 3 people thought for a while and felt that it was not easy to find a compartment with enough seats. They did not want to miss it easily. At most, there are 3 people sitting in a row. After entering the compartment, Harry closed the door and said to Hermione excitedly, "You know, I still have a family, and he is my godfather." I don't know whether Harry was too excited or he didn't know how to tell what happened. In addition, Ron was also present last night and knew what happened. He also interrupted from time to time with an excited look on his face. As a result, although the 2 of them were telling the story of what happened last night, but Hermione was confused. For a long time, Hermione finally sorted out the key points from the excited and messy sentences between the 2, and understood how Sirius was wronged by Pettigrew, why he was imprisoned in Azkaban without trial, and the real murderer turned out to be Ron's pets, etc., and then Hermione said with a confused look, "What is going on? Is there no justice in the wizarding world?" Chapter 86 Dementors on the train. After Harry and Ron's emotional description, Hermione had a deep understanding of the Ministry of Magic's actions. It can be said that she was extremely disappointed with the government of the magical world, especially when she thought of the judicial procedures in the magical world. What is the use of such a joke of law? If this happened in the Muggle world, once the media found that someone was imprisoned without trial, haha, what about the courts, the police and other law enforcement departments? You can wait to receive a lot of lawyers' letters like snowflakes, and they will not stop until you go bankrupt. When Hermione digested the messy information and wanted to ask some details of the matter, the Hogwarts train suddenly stopped halfway after an accident. Ron, who was sitting by the window, looked out the window and seemed to find something, saying, "There seems to be something outside." As soon as the voice fell, the lights in the compartment flickered for no reason, and then the train shook, and the three people felt as if someone was forcibly boarding the train. Soon, the three people noticed that the temperature in the carriage dropped suddenly. When the train shook violently again, Harry saw through the glass on the compartment door that a dark shadow was about to open the compartment. As a scabby hand opened the compartment door, Harry, who was cold and stiff, was horrified to see a black shadow with blisters all over his body appear in front of him. In fact, when this poor Dementor opened the compartment door, he was more horrified than Harry. What did he smell when he opened the compartment door? In addition to smelling Harry, who the leader had ordered not to approach, he also smelled that his master was sleeping in the compartment. Especially the latter, this was going to cost him his life. When the poor Dementor recalled the scene when he was exposed to the sun by the pseudo-angel feathers, he suddenly felt that his hands and feet, who were not afraid of ice, were cold, his whole body was cold, and his soul was flying. Even if Li Feng was disturbed from sleeping and didn't have the so-called morning mood, the poor Dementor had already imagined that he would definitely be skinned by his leader as a warning after leaving the train. He was very confused and wanted to ask his leader what he should do now. What the hell did I do to offend anyone? Why is it my turn to search this compartment? Li Feng originally thought that after the train started, he would enjoy the beautiful scenery while eating snacks. Unfortunately, he forgot that the train would shake slightly during the journey. These shakings not only failed to wake Li Feng up, but made him feel like he was in a cradle, which directly led to Li Feng's better sleep. Until now, a large number of Dementors boarded the train, causing the temperature in the compartment to drop rapidly. Li Feng, who was awakened by the cold, finally opened his sleepy eyes. Li Feng lifted the coat covering his head, glanced at the Dementors standing outside the compartment at a loss, and blinked inexplicably. Damn, how did the good summer suddenly turn into winter? Li Feng, whose dream was interrupted, immediately yelled at the Dementors in a bad mood, "Close the door, and then get out of here." After shouting, Li Feng saw that the Dementors were still standing there stupidly, and scratched his head in confusion. What's going on? Why didn't they obey orders? Do you want me to treat you to a meal or do you want to rebel? On the side, Lupin, who was sleeping soundly, was awakened by Li Feng's sudden voice scolding the Dementors. When he opened his eyes and saw that there was a Dementor in the compartment besides the three children, he subconsciously stood up and drew out his wand to release the Expecto Patronus. Before Lupin could successfully cast the spell, Li Feng, who was thinking, suddenly remembered that the language of the Dementors was a bit special. How can I order them in human language? This thing doesn't understand human language. Li Feng pulled Lupin with an embarrassed look, indicating that if you have something to say, you should talk nicely and don't make a move. Lupin was stunned when he saw Li Feng stopping him from casting a spell, and then he remembered that the Dementors were Li Feng's servants. Lupin glanced at Harry and others who were slumped in their seats, and confirmed that the Dementor in front of him, who seemed to be frightened, did not hurt the three students. Thinking that you have to look at the owner before you beat the dog, you have to look at the owner. He had some friendship with Li Feng, so he should give him some face. Thinking of this, Lupin rolled his eyes at Li Feng, put away his wand and sat back in his seat, signaling Li Feng with his eyes to let the Dementors leave quickly. Li Feng smiled slowly, and hurriedly ordered the Dementors to get out again in the dead language. When the Dementors heard that Li Feng did not punish him, but only ordered him to leave, they hurriedly closed the compartment door at the fastest speed in their lives, turned around and left as if they were running for their lives. After a while, the Dementors on the entire train knew that their boss was sleeping on the train, and they all executed Li Feng's order to get out of here at the fastest speed. When Li Feng opened his coat and ordered the Dementors, Harry and Ron had already recognized Li Feng. When they thought of what they saw and heard Dumbledore praising Li Feng's time spell in front of them last night, they suddenly felt like they had found a backer. Especially seeing that Li Feng's magic was useless, and just a scolding made the black shadow leave the train obediently, it made them feel a lot more relaxed. "Mr. Austen, are you going to Hogwarts too?" Harry rubbed his arms to keep warm while looking at the Dementors going away through the car window. He asked curiously, what was that just now? Lupin was leaning on the car window and watching the Dementors leaving. He turned his head and said, that's the Dementors, the guards of Azkaban. They are searching for Sirius. Harry, who has always longed for family care, learned the truth of the matter through Dumbledore's narration last night. Although he has never met Sirius, his godfather, he has already regarded Sirius as a family member in his heart. When he heard Lupin's words that Sirius was a wanted criminal, he retorted without thinking, but Sirius was wronged. The real murderer is. Halfway through speaking, Harry suddenly remembered that although he knew the truth of the matter, even Dumbledore had no evidence to clear Sirius's suspicion. How could he convince the stranger in front of him to believe him? Harry looked at Li Feng, hoping that Li Feng could help him say something to prove that Sirius was wronged. After all, Li Feng was the guy who found out Pettigrew and he must know the truth of the matter. Lupin was stunned when he heard Harry's retort. When he thought about it, under normal circumstances no one would exonerate Sirius who had been convicted by the Ministry of Magic. Seeing Harry looking at Li Feng as if he was helping, Lupin first carefully looked at Harry's little face with doubtful eyes. Only when he saw Harry's face that was as handsome as his father, James, did he finally understand. Okay? Isn't this Harry Potter? I said, why would it be wrong to mention Sirius? How did Harry know that Sirius was wrongly accused? When Lupin recognized Harry and looked at Li Feng sideways, Li Feng first looked down at his clothes in confusion, then thought of what Lupin was thinking, shrugged and said, look what I'm doing, I drank a lot last night. Well, if you don't believe me, you can ask this little red-haired Mr. Weasley. I drank wine at his house last night. How do I know how Harry knew about Sirius? Ron, who was watching as a crowd, heard Li Feng call him the red-haired little Weasley. Although his face was a little unhappy, he still nodded honestly and said, Dumbledore told Harry about Sirius. Dumbledore happened to arrive last night when Mr. Austen used the time spell to control Pettigrew. At that time, Ron looked at Li Feng and said as if he wanted to laugh but thought it was impolite to laugh, when Dumbledore explained what happened, I'm sure Mr. Austen was drunk and snoring on the ground. Lupin nodded to show that he understood. Seeing that Harry was still shaking slightly, Lupin took out the chocolate from his pocket and handed it to Harry, saying, eat it, you will feel better. After speaking, Lu Ping looked at Li Feng angrily and said, how did you agree in the first place? Li Feng understood that Lupin was referring to his promise not to let Dementors approach and harm Harry, but I really don't do anything without money. Li Feng, who felt very wronged, looked at Harry speechlessly, who knows Harry's reaction to the Dementors was so big, but in the plot, Harry fell into coma once he saw the Dementors, and now Harry is still unconscious. The spirit monster is strictly following his orders, right? But how do you ask Li Feng to explain this? That Harry was originally in a coma, but now he was just frightened? I'm afraid that no matter how Li Feng explains it, Lu Ping probably won't believe it and will just think that Li Feng is shirking responsibility. Spreading his hands, Li Feng couldn't explain and glanced at the dim and rainy sky outside the car window. Since it was already time, Li Feng could just go back to the secret room to practice magic while looking at the woolen scenery. Li Feng picked up his shoulder bag and said, I'm leaving first. Come and play on my site when you have time. After saying that, Li Feng opened the portal and returned to the secret room in front of everyone. One night a few days later, Sirius, who was moldy in the old house, couldn't help but want to see Harry, so he wrote a letter to Li Feng. After Li Feng read the letter, he felt that Sirius was really good at playing. He actually asked him to open a portal and take the other person's luggage into a secret room. He could be Li Feng's companion and save himself from being bored in the old house alone. He could also let him know from time to time. Harry went to the secret room, so the two of them could sit at the tea table. Drink tea, chat, and teach Harry about magic. As for the Dementors, Sirius also mentioned in the letter that he understood, and said that he had explained the reason to Lupin. After all, he had been in Azkaban for 12 years and was familiar with the Dementors. The spirit monster did not harm Harry on the train. At first, Li Feng just pretended that he had not seen the letter. After all, what is the relationship between the two of them? He emptied the gold galleons, copied all the books in the black old house, and also asked for the black family's little symbol of aristocratic heritage. Elf, after all these things happened, it's only strange that the two of them have a good relationship. However, in the next few days, Sirius not only sent Li Feng 8 letters every day to urge Li Feng to open the portal, but also asked Lupin to come to his door to send a message. In the end, Sirius almost made Dumbledore come to talk to Li Feng. Li Feng, who had been annoyed for several days, said that he had no choice but to comfort himself. Sirius coming to the Chamber of Secrets would not only keep him company and relieve his boredom, but he could also learn something while teaching Harry. What is this called? Opening the portal to Black's old house, before Li Feng could step through the portal, he saw Sirius sitting on a pile of luggage with an expression like "I'll wait until the flowers have withered." Seeing the portal open, Sirius stood up and carried his luggage into the secret room. He threw the luggage to Kreaker and looked at Li Feng and said, "I'm still wondering why you came to pick me up. By the way, let your house elf help. I'll put up the tent and we'll be neighbors from now on." Chapter 87 Chapter 87 Distributing Gifts. At first, Li Feng was just too annoyed by Sirius to let him become his neighbor, but when Li Feng calmed down and thought about the whole thing, he realized that something was wrong. Sirius' move to the secret room may have something to do with Harry, but more likely it was because he was monitoring Li Feng. He wanted to see Harry from time to time, so he just asked Harry to come to the secret room, and then Li Feng helped open the door. There was no need. Move place? The more he thought about it, the more something was wrong. Through some clues, Li Feng discovered that Dumbledore's shadow could be vaguely seen behind his neighbor Sirius. Li Feng guessed that Dumbledore was worried about him. This was not Li Feng's guess. There were many reasons. First of all, there was a high probability that Dumbledore knew about his own magical properties, and his own portal was not even restricted by Hogwarts. Finally, there was also the large amount of magic that he had collected from Death Eaters' homes. I don't know what this group of Death Eaters thought. Anyway, most of the knowledge Li Feng searched for was related to black magic. As the headmaster of Hogwarts, would Dumbledore allow a guy who is obviously biased towards dark wizards to wander around the school after learning a lot of dark magic? Obviously impossible. As for driving Li Feng out of Hogwarts, haha, Dumbledore has learned the portal, and he knows what kind of abilities Li Feng has. It is estimated that Li Feng was kicked out of school this morning, and in the evening, Li Feng will quietly return to school, hide in a corner and continue to enjoy this feng shui treasure land with a high concentration of magic power. Compared with Li Feng hiding in the dark, it is better to let Li Feng be in the light. At least with Sirius's surveillance, Dumbledore can know immediately if Li Feng causes trouble. Li Feng understood, but he didn't say anything. Just monitor, and he didn't do anything bad. After all, if Li Feng really wanted to do something, could Sirius stop him? It's not that Li Feng is bragging. If he wants to leave, no one can stop him, not even Dumbledore. On the first weekend of becoming Li Feng's neighbor, Sirius got up as soon as the sun rose for the first time and borrowed Kreaker from Li Feng to tidy up the slightly worn tent. After that, wearing a decent formal suit, he stood next to Li Feng looking at the time for a while and feeling bored for a while, watching Li Feng practice brewing potions in front of the crucible. At first, Li Feng asked Sirius curiously, "What day is it today and you are dressed so coquettishly?" Sirius did not answer Li Feng's question, but just grinned. When Li Feng saw that Sirius didn't answer, he didn't bother to answer him. Especially when he saw Sirius's face showing nervousness and giggles from time to time, Li Feng just thought that Sirius had convulsions or endocrine disorders. It wasn't until around noon that Lupin brought Harry, Ron, and Hermione to the secret room to break through the door. Li Feng didn't understand why Sirius was wearing formal clothes to meet Harry when he saw him. Why should it be so grand that a salute could be fired to greet him? Harry? Harry was still a little nervous and hesitant when he entered the Chamber of Secrets. He didn't know how the unmasked godfather would treat him compared with his muggle aunt and uncle. He had never received any care from his aunt and uncle. If Sirius also hated Harry, Harry felt that he should jump into the chocolate pool and eat a big meal, using sweets to relieve his frustration. Sirius seemed to see that Harry was as nervous as he was, so he smiled what he thought was the most charming smile, opened his arms and half-crouched in front of Harry, wanting to give Harry a hug. Obviously, Sirius's actions made Harry very happy, knowing that this handsome godfather was completely different from his aunt and uncle. When Li Feng saw the two of them hugging each other passionately, he curled his lips and lowered his head to stir the potion in front of him. On the side, Hermione saw that Harry had a lot to say to Sirius after meeting his godfather. She pulled Ron, who wanted to say hello to Sirius and join in the fun, and consciously followed Lupin to Li Feng, looking at him curiously. Potion in the crucible. As Snape's know-it-all lady, Hermione only took a few glances at the remains of the medicinal materials on the experimental table and discovered that there were many differences between Li Feng's way of handling the medicinal materials and the descriptions in the textbook, which puzzled Hermione. Isn't potions a delicate subject? Anyone with a clear eye can see that Li Feng's operation is not based on the instructions in the textbook, but how can he make a magic potion that is of surprisingly high quality? From Ron's mouth, Hermione already knew that Li Feng was very good at certain magics. Her little mind not only guessed, could it be that this person is also a hidden potion master? But why does the other party live underground in Hogwarts? Li Feng looked at Hermione's puzzled expression and felt that this little loli was quite cute, but... Li Feng looked at the freckle-faced Ron next to Hermione. When he thought about such a cute little loli finally being fucked by this red-haired pig, he felt unhappy. How did Hermione fall in love with Ron in the first place? There's no reason at all. Li Feng, who had a crush on Hermione when he first watched the movie, couldn't help but fantasize, counting the time, his bastard would have taken off his diapers long ago. How about tying Hermione back to the Marvel world and waiting for him to return? When he got home, he took Hermione home with him and asked her to be his daughter-in-law. It's quite touching to think that my daughter-in-law is a wizard. Beside him, Liu Ping saw Li Feng staring straight at Hermione with his mind wandering, and showing his brother pig face shamefully. He always felt that Li Feng was thinking about something bad, so he interrupted Li Feng's fantasy and said, "Oh. Sting, regarding Harry being frightened by the Dementors on the train, Sirius explained to me that I misunderstood you, and I solemnly apologize to you now." Li Feng retracted his divergent thoughts, glanced at Liu Ping with empty hands, curled his lips, and said disdainfully, "I didn't see your sincerity." How could Liu Ping, who knew Li Feng well enough, not guess what Li Feng wanted? His eyes twitched slightly as he said, "What do you want?" "As promised in advance, I don't have much wealth." Li Feng raised the corners of his mouth slightly and said with a smile, "I don't want your things. I just need to borrow some books from the Hogwarts library for me. You are now a professor at Hogwarts. Borrowing books is not the same for you. It's as simple as eating and drinking." Liu Ping was stunned. When he taught Li Feng before, he knew that Li Feng sneaked into the library in the middle of the night to copy books. Why is he not satisfied with copying in the library now? Are he ready to take it back to the secret room and copy it? Li Feng saw Liu Ping's doubts and explained helplessly, "Filch and his cat recently noticed something unusual in the library at midnight, causing him to go to the library to inspect it almost every half hour. It's really annoying to me now. I kept the mirror space open and copied books." Liu Ping, who had played hide-and-seek with Filch when he was a student, understood Li Feng's mood at this moment, showed a deeply gratified expression, and couldn't help but smile. "Okay, I will help you borrow a few books every day. Book, will you ask your owl to come to my dormitory in the middle of the night to pick up the book? Or will you open the portal and go there yourself?" Li Feng thought for a moment and said, "Let's go there in person and have some late-night snacks in your dormitory." "Liu Ping, your love of taking advantage of others has been cured." After listening to the conversation between the two, Hermione felt that the amount of information was a bit overwhelming, and she couldn't accept it for a while. She couldn't help but ask, "Mr. Austen, does Professor Dumbledore know that you are hiding in Hogwarts?" Li Feng raised his eyebrows and curled his lips and said, "I know, he took a lot of benefits from me before he agreed not to report me." Pointing to Sirius in the distance, Li Feng continued, "Did you see that Dumbledore also asked that guy is spying on me?" Lupin rolled his eyes and sneered. "Don't listen to his nonsense. He has gained more benefits than Dumbledore." Liu Ping seemed to have thought of something, rolled his eyes, and said, "Now there are 3 children who also know that you are hiding here. Do you want to give them some gifts to shut their mouths?" Hearing Lupin's naked blackmail, Hermione and Ron looked at each other. Although they knew that this was Lupin's kindness, they both felt that they were not familiar with Li Feng, and they were somewhat embarrassed to receive this unexpected benefit. When the two were about to refuse, Lupin smiled and said to them, "I'm joking with Austen, but he does have bad things. Are you sure you don't want to see the meeting gift first before rejecting?" Of course Li Feng knew that Lupin was joking, and what if Hermione and Ron reported on him? Li Feng just patted his butt and changed his hiding place, but Dumbledore was different. He would probably be busy turning Hogwarts over to find Li Feng, so in a sense, Dumbledore would still protect Li Feng and let him. Li Feng was peacefully being monitored by Sirius in the secret room. Li Feng scratched his head and thought about what gifts to give to the 2 children, then turned to the tent and shouted, "Creaker, bring that Half-Blood Prince textbook." As soon as he finished speaking, Kriaker handed a worn textbook to Li Feng with both hands. Without saying a word, he turned and returned to the tent. Lupin frowned and looked at Kriaker. He felt that Kriaker was a little different from before. Li Feng handed the textbook to Hermione and said with a smile, "This is your hush money. This is a textbook about potions. There is also a powerful magic in it. Since you like books, I will give it to you." In fact, Hermione wanted to refuse Li Feng's benefits at first, but she was a little hesitant when she heard that Li Feng gave her textbooks. Who knows that she is a good child who loves knowledge? Especially when she heard that this was a potions textbook, and it contained a spell that even Li Feng said was good, Hermione immediately put her hesitation behind her, took the textbook and said, "Thank you." Then, Li Feng looked at Ron who was looking forward to it, touched his chin and said while thinking, "I only know that you like wizard chess and Quidditch, I really can't think of anything at the moment." In the middle of speaking, Li Feng suddenly saw his owl. At first, Li Feng bought the owl to deliver messages, but after Li Feng moved to the secret room, he discovered that his owl either ate or slept. He had never sent a few letters at all. He always opened the portal and went there in person. "I bought this stuff for free." After thinking about it, Li Feng pointed to the owl with big-eared bat blood and said, "Do you like that thing? I gave it to you." Ron glanced at Hermione who was already looking through the textbook, and then looked at the owl in the distance. To be honest, Ron liked this owl very much, and it was his own owl. He said shyly, "Thank you, Mr. Austen, I like it very much." After Li Feng finished distributing the gifts, Liu Ping asked curiously, "Kriaker seems to have changed a lot." Chapter 88 The Final Madness. Kriaker's love of talking to himself and scolding others may have something to do with his birth environment or age, but the Horcrux locket that can only tempt people is definitely responsible. Who made Kriaker wander around the locket when he had nothing to do? Thinking about how to destroy it? It would be strange if Voldemort in the locket didn't drive Kriaker crazy. But after Kriaker followed Li Feng, not only could he not touch the locket, but he was also treated by Li Feng from time to time with healing magic and purification magic to purify his slightly twisted mind. Even if Li Feng's magic was only half as effective as that of an orthodox white wizard, he couldn't resist Li Feng casting a spell on him when he had nothing to do. So Li Feng spent a lot of effort on Kriaker. If Kriaker's age was not an irreversible problem, Kriaker would probably have returned to normal by now, and he wouldn't be like this now. Seeing that Lupin was curious about Kriaker's transformation, Li Feng roughly described the process of his treatment of Kriaker and smiled, "It's fine now, not like before, buzzing in my ears all day long." Lupin nodded, indicating that he understood. He knew where Li Feng came from and understood that the treatment methods in his hands came from other worlds, some of which he couldn't even understand, just like the Key of Solomon. As long as a person who believed in God held it and recited the spell, he could restrain the werewolf. This made him never understand how ordinary people without magic power could do it. On the side, Ron was confused, while Hermione heard something. In Hermione's cognition, whether it was magic or potions, they were just simple treatments for physical injuries. She said she had never heard of spells that could heal the mind. Otherwise, those who were tortured to madness by the Death Eaters and sent to St. Mungo's hospital for magical injuries would have been discharged long ago. The more she looked at Li Feng, the more mysterious Hermione felt. She asked curiously, "Mr. Austen, do you know how to heal the mind?" "It's purification," Li Feng shook his head and said, "I'm just purifying Kriaker's slightly twisted mind. Of course, if you think that removing the other person's bad memories under oblivion can also be considered healing the mind, then I dare to nod and say yes. Lupin curled his lips slightly speechlessly and said disdainfully, "According to what you said, I can also heal mental trauma, and my skills are much better than yours." Hermione was very interested in purification, and asked with bright eyes, "Can I do you want to learn it?" Of course, Li Feng didn't care. If the little girl wanted to learn it, she could learn it. It was just a purification spell, not a big spell. With the natural favorability bonus, Li Feng took out the magic book and handed it to Hermione, saying, "You can copy the spell and take it back to understand it yourself, or you can come to the secret room to find me when you have questions. I practice magic in the secret room at any time." Li Feng not only said this, but also did it. So when the students of Hogwarts packed their luggage and happily welcomed the summer vacation, Li Feng, who was immersed in the magic ocean, realized that he had stayed in the dark secret room for more than a year. In the past year in the secret room, Li Feng gained a lot of benefits. Not to mention the improvement of strength. Anyway, Li Feng felt that he could beat himself who had just come to this world. And this white skin, Britain is a rainy country, and Li Feng is a guy who likes to hide in the secret room to practice magic. The days of sunbathing are few and far between. If it weren't for Kriaker using various magic herbs to nourish Li Feng when cooking, Li Feng would have the same pale skin color as a vampire. In addition to these, the biggest gain is the magic book the size of a matchbox in his pocket. Now the spells in the magic book are no longer a few, but after Kriaker copied the books of Hogwarts day and night, Li Feng himself does not know how much magic is in this seemingly small magic book. Now Li Feng dares to pat his chest and admit that I have most of the books in Hogwarts. As for the original plot, except for the Dementors floating outside Hogwarts, the rest have been dealt with by Li Feng. Didn't you see that Harry has replaced the tea time with Hagrid's time to come to the Chamber of Secrets to chat with Sirius? Where is the plot? As the students left, Sirius was also packing his luggage. In fact, during the 6 months when Sirius was half monitoring and half teaching Li Feng, he was very sure that Li Feng was just practicing magic. Now packing luggage is just taking advantage of the opportunity of Hogwarts summer vacation to leave the Chamber of Secrets. After all, in order to monitor Li Feng, Sirius has fewer days in the sun than Li Feng. He feels that if he stays in the Chamber of Secrets, he doesn't know whether Li Feng has done anything, but he will definitely go crazy. Not long after Sirius left, Li Feng looked at Merlin's magic ring reluctantly. It was time for him to leave. Because Li Feng had sensed that the quantum energy in his body was weakening. This thing was linked to the portal. God knows how the quantum energy is replenished. If he did not return to the Marvel world before the quantum energy dissipated, he would really have to stay in the Harry world. It was not even clear whether the portal could be used after returning to the Marvel world. After all, the way he obtained the portal was inexplicable. For the Infinity Stones, Li Feng had to give up the Feng Shui treasure land of Hogwarts. After a long time, Li Feng took a deep breath and exhaled slowly, and said to Kriaker, "Kriaker, leave the 2 largest suitcases, pack the rest of the luggage, and go to Azkaban immediately to wait for me. I will pick you up after I finish my work." Kriaker nodded blankly, cast a spell to put away the tent and other luggage, and said with his head down, "Yes, boss." After a while, Kriaker brought a lot of luggage and teleported all the way to Azkaban. As for Li Feng, he kept thinking about the loopholes in his plan with a gloomy face. He was ready to make a big deal before leaving this world. As for how big this deal is, haha, some people describe a man's achievements like this: rich at the age of 30, still have a girlfriend at the age of 40 to 50, can drive himself at the age of 70 to 80, can pee standing at the age of 100, and his photo is still hanging on the wall at the age of 300. The achievements that Li Feng can achieve by what he wants to do are probably that his photo will still be hanging on the wall of the Ministry of Magic 500 years later. For several days in a row, Li Feng kept changing into other people's appearances, pretending to wander around and appearing in various corners of the UK, silently taking a few nearby terrains. Until this evening, not far from the home of Minister of Magic Cornelius Fudge, Li Feng changed into a homeless beggar squatting on the side of the road, scanning the pedestrians on the street with his eyes. Looking for Fudge who came back from get off work. There are many reasons why Li Feng targeted Fudge as his first target. First, after a simple investigation, Li Feng knew that Fudge liked money, so Li Feng thought that this guy should have a lot of collections at home, and these collections, whether knowledge or magic props, were all on Li Feng's robbery list. Secondly, his status. He is the Minister of Magic after all. If his home was robbed, it would cause a lot of noise. It should not be difficult to attract Dumbledore's attention. As long as Dumbledore was led away from Hogwarts and Hogwarts was left unguarded, Li Feng's plan would be successful. It was only when Li Feng came to Fudge's house that he realized that he had thought wrong. He didn't know how wizards' brains grew. They all liked to hide their homes, which made Li Feng's plan to break into Fudge's house and rob him before Fudge got off work fail before it was implemented. How can you rob someone if you don't even know where his home is? There was no way. Li Feng could only squat on the side of the road and wait for Fudge to come back and reveal the hidden house before starting to rob. About half an hour later, Li Feng finally found Fudge, who was humming a little tune and walking home with his wife. Li Feng pretended not to see Fudge and followed him. When Fudge showed his house, Li Feng shot a magic attack with his left hand at Fudge's wife, knocking her away, and shot a temptation spell at Fudge with his right hand. Before the amulet on Fudge's body could take effect, Li Feng drew out his wand and cast a petrification spell on him. As for how the nearby muggles would react to such a fantastic scene, Li Feng didn't care. He had long been annoyed with these fake and noble pure-blood wizards, especially the pure-blood theory that was so sick that it was hopeless. Li Feng knew that although Fudge was not a Death Eater, he was still a supporter of the bloodline theory, so now, he didn't mind letting Fudge see how he, a wizard born in a poor peasant family, beat them, a group of pure-blood wizards, and trampled the so-called pure-blood theory under his feet. It is not known whether Fudge originally had little fighting power or he was greedy for power and corrupted his original strength. Anyway, Fudge was subdued by Li Feng before Li Feng used his subsequent means. Li Feng curled his lips and said disdainfully, "Really weak." After that, Li Feng dragged Fudge and rushed into his house quickly. While entering Fudge's house, Li Feng waved to open the portal and summoned the Dementors who had been waiting for orders to Fudge's house. Just as the Dementors searched every corner of the room, Li Feng untied the petrified Fudge, and cast another temptation spell, asking, "Dear Minister, take me to appreciate your collection." Fudge was a wizard after all. Li Feng was afraid that the other party had a high resistance to temptation spells. When Fudge took Li Feng to the collection room, Li Feng did not forget to replenish the temptation spell at any time. When Fudge woke up and saw that the secret room that was originally filled with collections was empty, his tears were so miserable that they could be compared with the annual rainfall in the UK. After looting Fudge's house, Li Feng did not go far away, but hid in the distance and watched Aurors coming in and out of Fudge's house. Li Feng, who had not seen Dumbledore, frowned. It seems that Dumbledore did not come? Didn't Dumbledore come to comfort Fudge at this time? Or has Dumbledore already fallen asleep? This makes no sense at all, it's not dark enough to sleep yet. Half an hour later, Li Feng, who was sure that Dumbledore would not come, dared to loot the next target, Draco Malfoy's house. In addition to the fact that Li Feng had entered his house when the Dementors searched Sirius before, and was not afraid that Malfoy would hide his house well, there was another reason that this family, from top to bottom, were all staunch supporters of the pure blood theory that Li Feng disliked, and Li Feng would feel guilty if he did not loot them. Chapter 89 Hogwarts Disaster Day. After successively ransacking several families supporting the theory of pure blood, Li Feng, who had never seen Dumbledore, had to return to Azkaban in advance to hand over the 2 bulging suitcases to Kriaker and replace them with 2 traceless ones. The telescopic suitcase later appeared in Nocturne Alley. Compared to Diagon Alley, there are more dark magic items here. As for the dangers, let's take a look at the Dementors that cover the sky and the moon. Faced with these disgusting things that can't be killed, Li Feng doesn't believe that anyone except Dumbledore can except for Leto and a few others, who dared to face his army of Dementors. As for the wizards joining together to resist, it's not that Li Feng looks down on them, but that these wizards don't know how many years of peace they have had. They know a lot about teamwork, and the other party is all hanging out in Nocturne Alley. They are obviously not good people. They are basically selfish guys, so it would be nice if they don't hold each other back. Speaking of which, Li Feng is not a jobber. He needs to be more familiar with the use of the fire calming curse now. If someone really gets together to fight, Li Feng doesn't mind using a few fire calming curses, as well as those who have super protective abilities. Li Feng, don't be afraid, the mirror space means that you will be locked up if you shut down people, and there will be no room for any discussion. But Li Feng was also quite puzzled. He never hid the presence of Dementors during the looting. Others didn't know that Li Feng could control Dementors. How could Dumbledore not know? Why is it that he has almost plundered most of the wizarding world and hasn't seen Dumbledore yet? Could it be that Dumbledore knew his ultimate goal was Hogwarts? Li Feng, who was standing on the roof looking out at Nocturne Alley, licked his lips. Since Lao Deng won't stop me, I won't be polite. Wang Cai, let all the Dementors rush into the store and drive away all the people inside. If anyone resists, they will attack as a group. If you still dare to resist, I allow you to use the Dementor's kiss. Just when Li Feng was about to finish ransacking Nocturne Alley and was hesitating whether to turn his attention to Diagon Alley, Dumbledore, who was staying in the Hogwarts library, could hardly sit still. Those letters asking for help were coming to him like snowflakes. He was hit on the head, and the library was almost packed with owls delivering letters. Dumbledore knew that Li Feng had done it since he knew that Dementors were involved in the accomplices of the robbery, and he guessed Li Feng's goal from the beginning. Who told Li Feng that his favorite thing to do at Hogwarts was to copy and discuss books? I want all kinds of books. Before the library was properly arranged, Dumbledore did not dare to leave Hogwarts easily. It was not until Snape, McGonagall, and 4 other branch principals rushed to the library after receiving Dumbledore's request for help that Dumbledore finally hurriedly ordered the 4 professors to guard the library and open the portal to Nocturne Alley. In Chuan-Kay Alley, Li Feng, who was busy working in the drugstore and paying attention to his surroundings, suddenly saw a portal appearing on the street. He grinned silently, but Li Feng was not in a hurry to leave for the time being. He also wanted to confirm whether the person in front of him was Deng Xiaoping. What if a Zibai guy comes and Li Feng plunges into the trap of Hogwarts? After a while, when the Dementors heard that they were sure they smelled Dumbledore's scent, Dumbledore had already taken action against the Dementors in the sky. While Li Feng opened the portal, he watched Dumbledore release the God Guard and let a silver-white phoenix chase the Dementors around, but it just made the Dementors run around. It's a little difficult to kill them. Li Feng was not sure whether Dumbledore could kill the Dementors. In order to reduce unnecessary losses, Li Feng ordered Wang Kai to lead the Dementors and Dumbledore through a slave contract to entangle Dumbledore in a non-stop fight. If it was discovered that Dumbledore showed signs of leaving, allowing the Dementors to attack the residents staying in Nocturne Alley. After crossing the portal, Li Feng turned around and closed the portal. He glanced at Dumbledore, who was showing off his tricks and calling his name loudly. He prayed in his heart, "I hope Dumbledore's temper is the same as in the movie, and I don't want to see innocent people. Someone sacrifices, even if this person is a dark wizard hanging out in Nocturne Alley." If Dumbledore had appeared in front of Li Feng since the beginning of his robbery, Li Feng would have directly opened the portal to the library without even thinking about it, and looted the books that had not been copied but had magical powers. As for those books without magical powers, Li Feng said that time travel if the door cannot be removed, it will be useless if he robs it. But now, all fools know that Dumbledore has guessed his plan, so Li Feng will not rush into the library stupidly. Li Feng, who was hiding outside the school, opened the portal to the size of a marble and quietly observed the library. After seeing 4 professors guarding it, he opened the portal directly to Pomona Sprout's herbal greenhouse. This is also the result of Li Feng's careful consideration. First of all, some magic materials are unique to Harry's world. Even if Li Feng has superb potion brewing skills, it is still useless without the materials after returning to the Marvel world. Secondly, if Li Feng wants to successfully get the books he wants, some small tricks are still necessary, such as leading the 4 professors out of the library respectively, and Sprout's medicine garden also has communication magic in addition to traps. I won't go into details about its function, it's just to allow Sprout to notice the changes in the medicine garden immediately. What Li Feng wants is to use communication magic to lure Sprout out of the library. As for the traps in the medicine garden, these are just to prevent birds and beasts from destroying the medicine garden. In addition, this is a school. So powerful traps are not suitable. What if a naughty student is injured? Therefore, Li Feng has enough strength to ignore the traps of the agencies. When Li Feng deliberately triggered the communication magic and broke into the medicine garden to happily harvest various medicinal seeds or seedlings, Sprout, who was guarding the library, immediately sensed that someone was making trouble in her greenhouse. She covered her mouth and said nervously and helplessly, "Merlin's socks, an animal broke into my medicine garden at this time." Snape had taught Li Feng potion and knew that Li Feng was actually very interested in medicinal herbs. When he heard Sprout mention the greenhouse inexplicably, Snape suddenly realized something and said nervously, "Not good, Li Feng's target is medicinal herbs." McGregor was stunned for a moment, stretched out his hand to open the portal to the sky above the medicine garden, so as to check the specific situation in the medicine garden. Li Feng, who sensed the fluctuation of the portal, looked up at the portal, and immediately lowered his head to speed up the harvesting action in his hand, wanting to harvest as many herbal seeds as possible before the professor arrived at the greenhouse. When the portal in the sky closed and appeared in front of the greenhouse again, Li Feng opened the portal without thinking, dropped a scroll and entered the portal with the medicinal herbs. Snape and Sprout, who were a step slower, didn't wait to point their wands at Li Feng, and could only helplessly watch Li Feng close the portal. Sprout saw that the various medicinal herbs he had carefully cultivated were blown up by Li Feng, and his face turned pale with anger, and his whole face was twitching. Snape didn't rush to comfort Sprout, but hurriedly picked up the scroll on the ground. Snape, who just opened the scroll and took a look, also turned pale. He hurriedly threw the scroll to Sprout and said while running to his own storage room, "The scroll is Austin's compensation to you, and you stay here to prevent Austin from returning to the medicine garden." On the scroll, in addition to giving compensation to Sprout, Li Feng also notified Snape of his next target. Unfortunately, Li Feng chose Snape's collection. Snape, who was running wildly, secretly hated Hogwarts for the first time, and hated the guy who invented the portal. It was the same road from the medicine garden to the storage room. On one side, Li Feng opened the portal directly to his storage room, while on the other side, Snape ran forward. Who was faster and who was slower? When Snape ran into his own storage room, he could only watch Li Feng close the portal and the shelves that lost most of the rare herbs and potions. Looking at the scroll that Li Feng deliberately left on the ground as compensation, Snape picked it up with a sullen face and opened it. After reading the contents of the scroll and understanding that Li Feng used Merlin's magic ring and some magic to compensate, Snape looked at the rare herbs and potions left on the shelf with twitching eyes. He knew that Li Feng did not want to take all of them, but deliberately left the potions, just like Sprout's medicine garden. As long as Sprout dared to leave the medicine garden, Li Feng would immediately return to the medicine garden and harvest all the herbs. In the same way, if Snape ignored these herbs and potions and went straight back to the library, then Li Feng would open the portal again and take all these things into his pocket. Of course, Li Feng also knew that Snape could return to the library to protect the books as long as he hid the herbs and potions, but it would take time to collect the potions, and it would take time to collect the rare herbs. What if the herbs were damaged and the efficacy was greatly reduced? And that was all Li Feng needed. As long as Dumbledore was led out of the campus and the professors were led away, Li Feng, who was wandering around freely through the portal, didn't believe that he couldn't get the magic books. The only trouble was McGonagall. After all, the other party could also open the portal. Of course, Li Feng's proficiency in the portal was far better than McGonagall's, and he was not afraid that the other party could catch up with him. Moreover, as long as McGonagall left the library, he had plenty of ways to make McGonagall run back to the library on his legs. According to the plan, after Li Feng opened the portal and dropped a scroll as compensation, he frantically looted the private collection of Mr. Phileas Flitwick, the dean and spell teacher of Ravenclaw College. Flitwick, who was guarding the library, had already sensed that the various spells he had researched were being looted by Li Feng. Flitwick hesitated. He thought that Mag knew the portal spell after all, and with her own strong strength, she could at least stop Li Feng for a moment. As long as there was a moment of buffer time, Mag would open the portal to take them back to the library, and Li Feng would not be able to rob the library. Mag seemed to see Flitwick's thoughts and immediately opened the portal to send Flitwick to his private collection room. Li Feng did not wait for Mag's portal to open, and immediately opened the door to Mag's collection room. Mag was speechless and helpless when she sensed Li Feng in her collection room. She had no choice but to open the portal to return to her collection room. Just in case, Mag did not close the portal, but connected the library and the collection room together. Although Li Feng, who escaped to the outside of the school, did not snatch anything from Mag, he did not take it to heart. Instead, he opened the marble-sized portal to the library and secretly observed everything in the library. Seeing that Mag was in the collection room and just maintaining the portal, Li Feng quietly opened the portal and got into the blind spot of the library, and immediately opened his portal in front of Mag's portal, so that the two portals were close together. If Mag crossed the portal at this time, she would find that she actually passed through two portals, and the place she was teleported to was naturally not in the library, but outside the campus. When Mag understood what was going on and slowly reopened the portal, Li Feng followed the same method and put his portal close to Mag's portal again. Helpless Mag could only hide her private collection in a hurry. When she returned to the library, Li Feng had already taken away most of the magical books. Only Snape, who had hidden the potion and returned to the library first, stood in the library with a sullen face and tightly held the scroll in his hand. Chapter 90 Sister Time. Back in Azkaban, Li Feng grinned and gently stroked the suitcases in front of him. The so-called gold belt of murder and arson, don't underestimate just a few suitcases. These are all seamless retractable suitcases, storing Li Feng's crazy looting of most of the magic world, and all of them are magical items. If they are all taken out for exhibition, it is estimated that a large truck cannot fit them. With the help of these materials, I believe that as long as Li Feng is willing to work hard and practice hard to transform them into strength, he can gain a firm foothold in the Marvel world. Even if there is no army of Dementors, he will no longer be an unknown person who acts according to other people's faces. In order to prevent Dumbledore from guessing where he is hiding, Li Feng uses the slave contract to let the Dementors who have been restraining Dumbledore scatter and flee first, and then wait for him to open the portal at the designated location, take them back to Azkaban, and move all to the Marvel world. After a while Wang Ke told Li Feng through the slave contract that they had gotten rid of Dumbledore. Immediately, Li Feng opened the portal and let the Dementors get into a seamlessly retractable suitcase, and carried the suitcase to the place where the portal was opened. Back in the Marvel world, Li Feng ordered Kriaker, who was curious about the new world, to drag the RV out of the cave, while he sat cross-legged on the sand, sensing the changes in the quantum energy in his body. If the quantum energy continued to dissipate, Li Feng said that he would never be able to open the portal again. Once he lost the way to become stronger quickly, it would make him very distressed. After a while, Li Feng happily sensed that the quantum energy not only did not dissipate, but was slowly recovering. Although Li Feng was confused about the quantum energy that dissipated and recovered, at least he knew that he could still use the portal in the future, which was also a happy thing. Li Feng let out a long sigh. Just as he was about to exit meditation, he seemed to hear someone shouting help in his ear. Li Feng opened his eyes and looked around. He asked in confusion, "Kriaker, did you hear someone asking for help?" Kriaker shook his head blankly and said, "Boss, did you hear it wrong? It was actually the sound of the wind." Li Feng rubbed his eyebrows and shrugged and said, "Maybe I was too busy at Hogwarts before and mistook the sound of the wind for a cry for help." Li Feng, who suspected that he had heard it wrong, put the cry for help behind his mind and pulled out his wand to drag the RV out of the cave. Sitting in the driver's seat, Li Feng was very puzzled. He touched the back of his head and thought for a long time before he realized that the car had been eating sand in the cave for a year and a half. The little gasoline that was originally left had evaporated cleanly. Where did the power come from to start it? There was no way. Li Feng could only order Kriaker to set up a tent in the cave as a temporary camp and modify the RV by the way. Modifying a caravan is a big project, which cannot be completed in a short time, and Li Feng still lacks some necessary ordinary materials. Although Li Feng brought back a lot of magic materials from Harry's world, the materials of the flying car are not all magic materials. Otherwise, with Mr. Weasley's family background, where would he get the spare money to modify the car? It is better to improve his family life with this money. It is just that buying these ordinary materials makes Li Feng a little embarrassed. Although he has been in the Marvel world for so many years, there are only a few places in the city that he is familiar with. First is Chinatown in New York. Although he has not been there for many years, Li Feng said that he is still very familiar with it. The problem is that New York is a metropolis, and there are too many cameras. It is estimated that as long as Li Feng shows up on the street, S.H.I.E.L.D. will come to the door in minutes. Although Li Feng now has both strength and a large army of Dementors and is not afraid of S.H.I.E.L.D. at all, he still avoids seeing it if he can, especially Fury. Talking to that boiled egg is too wasteful and there are pits everywhere. Li Feng said that he can't afford to hurt his brain cells. The second is Kathmandu, where Camartage is located. If Li Feng's strength had not improved much before, he might have chosen to buy materials in Kathmandu, but as his strength improved, any wizard with a little cultivation could discover his mana attribute. Let a dark wizard buy materials from a white wizard's nest? Li Feng is not so brave. When Li Feng is besieged by a group of wizards, will he resist or surrender? What if Li Feng's affairs are reported to Guyi? Do you think Guyi will kill Li Feng or Li Feng to appease the people? The last city is Portland, which is known as the City of Roses where Li Feng once lived for a while. The only trouble is that Li Feng is not sure whether S.H.I.E.L.D. is still paying attention to it. In the end, Li Feng chose to change his appearance and go to Portland to buy materials. Just as Li Feng was about to open the door to Portland, Kriaker, who had already set up the tent, walked out of the cave and came to Li Feng, looked up and asked, "Boss, Kriaker is going to cook for you, but I don't know what ingredients you have? Or where is the market? Kriaker will go buy it now." Market? Li Feng turned his head and looked at the desolate desert around him. Does this place look like a vegetable market? Moreover, Li Feng touched his pocket. What can I take to buy materials in Portland? My pocket is almost cleaner than my face. Scratching his head, Li Feng turned and walked into the tent, preparing to write a letter to Ancient One to ask her to come over to discuss something, and by the way, do some small business with the boss of Ancient One. As soon as he picked up the pen and parchment, Li Feng slapped his forehead. Damn, I have been in Harry's world for a long time, and there are things like phones in the world. What kind of letter am I writing? Does Ancient One have a mobile phone? And what is the phone number of Camartage? After thinking for a long time, Li Feng finally wrote a letter. Who told him not to remember Camartage's phone number? After writing the letter, Li Feng had just opened a miniature teleportation gate and was about to drop the letter directly into Guyi's lounge when Guyi's voice sounded from the other side of the teleportation gate. Li Feng. Master Guyi? You're at home. Although using the portal to send letters saved time and postage, he was discovered by Guyi before he could finish. I secretly sent the letter, then I quietly left again, which made Li Feng somewhat embarrassed. Guyi didn't care whether Li Feng was embarrassed or not. He guessed that Li Feng didn't dare to come to Comitage to see him in person. She probably had improved her strength and was afraid that her disciples would recognize her as a dark mage and would be taught a lesson. Ancient Yi directly opened the portal and walked into Li Feng's tent and was stunned for a moment when he saw Kriaker, who was obviously a magical creature. However, when Ancient Yi knew that Li Feng could carry magical creatures across time, he expected that such a day would come, so he just glanced at it. He stretched out his hand to signal Li Feng not to speak, but to sense the surrounding space energy with great interest. Compared to strange-looking magical creatures, Guyi is obviously more interested in space spells. Li Feng was stunned for a moment, glanced at Kriaker, and motioned for Kriaker to make tea and then take Guyi to visit his temporary residence. After a while, Guyi walked out of the tent, curiously walking around the tent that was small on the outside but more than 100 square meters inside, and said, "It's a very interesting prop. I suddenly have a new understanding of the fighting method in the mirror space. For example, when I fight an enemy, I release an infinite space, and even if he is exhausted, he cannot run in front of me. Haha, instead of using tactics that tire your opponent to death, you should first find an idiot who dares to fight you." Li Feng smiled, and at the same time took off the time turner from his neck and handed it to Guyi, saying, "Master, take a look at this first." While talking, Li Feng took out the magic book from his pocket, turned to the page recording the time converter, and motioned to Guyi to read it. Guyi, who had a profound knowledge of time magic, gradually calmed down. While touching the time converter in his hand, he frowned and looked at the magic book. For a long time, Guyi, who couldn't see a smile on his face, said seriously, "Li Feng, regarding the practice of time magic, I have warned you before, don't play with time, it will cause time branches." Ancient Yi held up the time turner and continued, "This little thing will allow you to go back to the past, but it also means that during a certain period of time in the past, you appeared in this world, and time will inevitably branch. You will trapped in an infinite loop of time branches, unable to escape forever." Li Feng nodded, indicating that he knew, but Li Feng shrugged his shoulders and said with a smile, "What if this world has been without me for a certain period of time in the past?" Guyi was stunned for a moment, and then realized that Li Feng was a person who could travel to other worlds. Once Li Feng opened the time travel gate and took a trip at will, where did Li Feng come from in the Marvel world? Not to mention that Sister Gu couldn't find Li Feng, I guess the Sister Time in the local world is also wondering, "You said it was obviously a small fish in its arms, how could it just disappear?" Then after a while it popped up inexplicably, and Sister Time said she couldn't figure it out. With a little uncertainty, Guyi guessed, "Do you want to use this little thing to return to the time when you left your home world when you returned to your home world from another world?" Li Feng nodded. This was also the method Li Feng had been looking for to prevent himself from missing certain plots. Just like this time, it took Li Feng a year and a half to travel to the Harry world, but it also took a year and a half to go to the Marvel world. If there was a way to return from the Harry world to the Marvel world, he could directly return to the place where he went to the Harry world. The next day, Sister Time thought that Li Feng was just leaving the Marvel world for a day. Li Feng was sure that he would not miss the opportunity to collect infinite gems. After listening to Li Feng's explanation, Guyi expressed his understanding, especially since Li Feng carefully set the time to return to the Marvel world on the day after the time travel in order to prevent time from branching out, which reassured Guyi a lot. Understanding Li Feng's attitude towards time and what he wanted, as well as knowing the consequences, Guyi, who was already interested in the time converter, didn't say much. He lowered his head and recorded the information on the time converter while jokingly saying, "But this way, come on, even though you are less than 30 years old in your home world, the time you traveled to another world still affects your body and will not be reduced because you return to the past. In other words, your ID card will show that you only have I am 30 years old, but my face is covered with age spots." The corner of Li Feng's mouth twitched. This joke is really not funny at all. Not to mention that Li Feng's lifespan has been extended after possessing magic power. Let's just say that there are countless treasures in other worlds that can make people live longer. If only Li Feng's luck was better. It is possible to live forever, and then you will always have a face in your 20s with age spots? What is that? Chapter 91 Kriakar and the Dementor and number 039, S temporary residence permit. After talking about the time converter, Ancient One looked at Kriakar. Li Feng saw this and hurriedly explained to Ancient One what a house elf is and the inner values of a house elf. After Li Feng's long-winded speech, Ancient One finally understood what Li Feng wanted to express. In short, Kriakar dared not leave Li Feng's side, otherwise Kriakar would die of self-blame due to the slavery cultivated over the years. This made Ancient One curious about Kriakar's race, and sternly warned Li Feng to keep an eye on Kriakar. As for the reason, haha, if the capitalists in the Marvel world knew that there were such loyal elves in the world who didn't want wages and would commit suicide immediately if he was killed, wouldn't they be crazy to capture Kriakar, and then draw blood to clone and copy him, and put hundreds of Kriakars to work in their own factories or various high-level jobs? Wouldn't they make a fortune? Li Feng was confused when Guyi was explaining. To be honest, he had never thought of such an operation. The only thing he thought of was that forces such as S.H.I.E.L.D. and Hydra would be interested in Kriakar, who had magic, and conduct dissection experiments. He had never thought of the capitalists' ideas. Having lived for an unknown period of time, the Ancient One, who had become a human shrew, had seen all kinds of ridiculous wars launched for a little benefit. He knew that humans like to commit suicide, and said faintly, Hydra will certainly cause trouble for you if they know the existence of Kriakar, but they use Kriakar more to improve their own strength. They believe more in the warriors they have trained since childhood, rather than the so-called elf warriors. But the capitalists are different. What they want is money. And cloning a Kriakar means that they pay less wages and have more income. What do you think those greedy capitalists will do? Not to mention those workers who are forced to lose their jobs. Let's say that most of a city is house elves. Once these house elves think that ordinary people are not worthy of being their masters, what do you think will happen if ordinary people go to war with house elves with magic? Don't think this is impossible. After all, in the concept of house elves, they are servants of magicians, not servants of ordinary people. Li Feng, who was frightened by the Ancient One, said slowly, what about the army? And the final nuclear peace? Guyi shook his head and still slightly looked at Li Feng. Some naive ideas were ridiculous, and said, then what? Except for the humans hiding in the shelters, at least half of the rest were killed or injured. I said at least, do you understand? In addition, the destruction of the environment has led to food shortages, and the evil thoughts of human nature have erupted in the disaster. Even if the humans hiding in the shelters, how many can survive? And from your introduction, I feel that the survival rate of house elves in an environment of radiation and food shortage is quite high. I am afraid that in a few hundred years, house elves will become the masters of the earth, and humans will be labeled as rare species, please do not eat and locked up in zoos. For some reason, after listening to the words of Guyi, Li Feng had the idea of killing Kriakar now. Fortunately, Guyi finally said faintly, I think I will use the Eye of Agamotto to see if there will be any changes in the future after I go back. If. Guyi did not finish his words, but looked at Kriakar. Li Feng also looked at Kriakar and nodded slightly. He knew what Guyi was thinking. If Guyi saw Kriakar betraying him in the future, then Li Feng would have to make Kriakar disappear. If he did not betray, Li Feng would naturally continue to enjoy Kriakar's service. After thinking about it, Li Feng slowly opened the suitcase containing the Dementors, scratched his head and said embarrassedly, this time I came back with a group of servants besides Kriakar. At the moment the suitcase was opened, Guyi frowned and waved his hand to force the biting cold air emitted by the Dementors back into the suitcase. Li Feng did not need to say more. She already understood that the creatures in the suitcase were not kind creatures, but a group of evil species that were half living and half undead. When Li Feng introduced that Dementors were basically unkillable creatures in the original world, Guyi raised his hand disdainfully and pointed at a Dementor, killing one on the spot. In the suitcase, when the cold air of the Dementors was sealed by Guyi in the suitcase without any leakage, Wang Ke looked at Guyi and Li Feng with a confused face. Seeing Guyi kill a tribe member easily and comfortably, Wang Ke immediately looked at Li Feng pitifully, begging for mercy, hoping that Li Feng could stop the bald lady from killing his tribe. Wang Ke felt that the shadow area in his heart had been expanding since he met Li Feng, but he didn't have the courage to say it. It was okay in Harry's world before, Li Feng basically ignored him, and he was still the leader of the Dementors at ease. Let's take a look at what kind of life he is living now. Not to mention that Li Feng didn't care about their hungry stomachs. And not to mention that hundreds of Dementors were crowded in the narrow suitcase where it was difficult to turn around. Just say, how can one person kill them now? It was agreed that Dementors cannot be killed, and that they are naturally invincible. What? The rules can be changed at any time? Gu Yi glanced at Li Feng and laughed. You call this unkillable? Li Feng shrugged. Not to mention that Gu Yi could easily kill Dementors, even the apprentices in Camartage could easily kill a few Dementors. However, it was also because there were so many people in Camartage who could kill Dementors that Gu Yi recorded the information of Dementors and applied for a temporary residence permit for them in Kriaker and stopped asking about it. Anyway, Dementors can't do anything in the Marvel world. Li Feng can keep them if he wants. Just think of Li Feng as a big dog with a bit of lethality. In addition, Li Feng also used a slave contract to bind Dementors, which was equivalent to tying an iron chain around the neck of the big dog. How could Dementors still make trouble? Compared to the Dementors, which are obviously soldiers, Gu Yi is more worried about Kriaker. After all, Dementors are useless to capitalists, and they are not even qualified to be bodyguards, unless that person likes to be sucked of happiness by Dementors and becomes a fool. However, Gu Yi looked at Li Feng with a smile, and said faintly, how do you provide them with food? Li Feng, damn, forget that these guys can't eat white rice, but absorb people's happiness. Or let the Dementors sneak into the prison to absorb the prisoners. Li Feng, who secretly looked at Gu Yi's face, immediately threw the bad idea he just thought of behind his mind. He didn't want to be hung in the desert to dry by Master Gu Yi, the guardian of mankind. Scratching his head, Li Feng looked down at Wang Ke and asked in the dead language, Wang Ke, how long can you live without food and water? Hearing Li Feng's question, Wang Ke guessed what Li Feng wanted to say and felt that his mentality was about to collapse. He said sadly, Master, although we can't starve to death, the hunger will drive us crazy. It's okay if we don't starve to death, and I don't care if we go crazy or not. Even if we go crazy, we are still bound by the slave contract. Li Feng thought that at worst, the Dementors would follow him to the other world to eat, and turned to Gu Yi and said, it's okay, the Dementors can't starve to death, let them starve, and I will feed them when I think of a way. After that, Li Feng closed the suitcase and let Wang Ke stay where he wanted. Walking to another suitcase, Li Feng rubbed his hands slightly flatteringly, and said while opening the suitcase, Master, do you want these materials? I want to sell them to you. Gu Yi looked down at the seamlessly retractable suitcase, and saw all kinds of props and materials placed in a mess inside the suitcase, some of which she found inexplicable, such as a teapot with its mouth open, chasing a floating magic flower, as if it would not stop until it took a bite. What's the matter, are you going to eat this flower from the spout of the pot and make yourself a pot of flower tea? Very interesting gadgets. Gu Yi casually took out a small object from the suitcase, looked at Li Feng and said, are you short of money? Li Feng scratched his head, looked at the RV dismantled by Kriaker in the distance, and said slowly, yes, very much. Gu Yi followed Li Feng's gaze to the RV, nodded and said, you want to transform the RV but lack funds. Yes. Li Feng did not hide anything about this. After all, Gu Yi would know it later even if he didn't say it, and he wanted to ask Gu Yi for help not only to sell materials. Hiding this and that would easily lose Gu Yi's trust. As a person, you must be honest. Only when there is a foundation of honesty between each other, some things are easy to talk about. Just like now, after Gu Yi agreed to spend money to buy materials, Li Feng handed the magic wand to Gu Yi and asked, Master, can you imitate this thing? Although Li Feng did not elaborate, Gu Yi still heard that Li Feng wanted to learn the craft of making magic wands. In fact, Li Feng had no choice. He was destined to return to the Marvel world. What if his wand broke or was damaged in the Marvel world? This thing was not sold in the Marvel world, and he couldn't go back to Harry's world to buy it. At least he didn't have that ability now. The only two ways he could think of were to learn to make wands himself or buy a bunch of spare ones. But when Li Feng asked Ollivander for his skills to make a living, Ollivander said that unless he was the inheritor of his mantle, he would not pass on the skills to outsiders. If Li Feng insisted on learning the skills of making wands, it was not impossible. He just needed to sign an unbreakable contract, inherit his shop, and never break the rules of choosing the owner of the wand. Li Feng patted his butt and left at that time, indicating that he would not learn it. Only those who were sick would sign the contract. Li Feng didn't want to stay in Harry's world, nor did he want to be a wand craftsman for life. He just wanted to improve his strength. As for buying a bunch of wands from Ollivander for backup, it would also require Ollivander to sell them to Li Feng, but who is Ollivander? The old-fashioned man who used a ruler to measure the wand for a long time before buying it, would he still sell it to Li Feng even though he knew he had a wand in his hand? So when he left Harry's world, Li Feng looted a lot of wands as spares, but after trying other wands, Li Feng realized that these looted wands were not easy to use, or that using these unfamiliar wands would make his strength decline a lot. With some curiosity, after Guyi used the wand to release a few spells, he said that the wand was good and could effectively improve the success rate of spell casting. As for imitation, it was not impossible, but the wand needed to be disassembled. When Li Feng heard this, he immediately took out a few looted wands from a suitcase and handed them to Guyi, asking Guyi to disassemble them as much as he wanted, and it didn't matter if he broke them directly. He had a lot of wands for Guyi to study slowly. Chapter 92 RV Renovation. After Guyi picked out the items he was interested in among the materials looted by Li Feng, he left with a traceless telescopic suitcase. Of course, the suitcase itself was also one of the items purchased by Guyi. Who made Guyi feel I am interested in a lot of magical items from other worlds, and I am also interested in the invisible telescopic spell. Not long after, the portal appeared again in Li Feng's tent. Guyi stood in the portal, handed a paper bag filled with banknotes to Li Feng, and said, "Have you been living in the desert recently?" Li Feng nodded after taking the money bag. Touched the back of his head, and said a little embarrassedly, "Master, do you have a way to hide the properties of your magic power?" In fact, Li Feng not only knew that Guyi had it, but also had a top-notch hiding method. He didn't see her using dark energy on her own. Apart from Cassilis who discovered it by accident, who else knew? Even if Modu and the others later found out that Guyi was using dark energy, they didn't observe it themselves. Guyi didn't know what Li Feng was thinking, so he nodded and said, "Bring the magic book." Hearing this, Li Feng quickly took out a magic book the size of a matchbox and handed it to Guyi. Guyi did not take the magic book. He just reached out and touched the magic book and burned the method of hiding mana attributes into the magic book and said, "Treat Kriakar well, in the future." Guyi paused for a moment, as if he was wondering whether to tell Li Feng the future he saw. Even if Li Feng had some knowledge of time magic, Li Feng might be able to see the future freely in the future. After hesitating for a while, thinking that if some things were told in advance, it would easily cause unknown changes, Guyi finally decided to hide certain things and said vaguely, "He is very good." After speaking, Guyi waved his hand to close the portal. Li Feng didn't think about the future, but just smiled inexplicably, because through Guyi's narration, he already understood that Kriakar would at least not betray him in the future, nor would he cause any trouble. It's just Guyi's attitude towards Kriakar that made Li Feng couldn't help but guess, it seems that Guyi knows my arrangements for Kriakar? After thinking about it, Li Feng threw his guess behind, "The future will be discussed in the future, now, don't worry about it." After getting the money, Li Feng estimated the time difference between Afghanistan and Portland with his fingers. When the shops in Portland were open for business, Li Feng faced Modu's face, opened the portal with the money bag and went to a certain store in Portland. Supermarket, prepare to buy materials for Momo modified RV. Carrying a large capacity shoulder bag, Li Feng traveled between Afghanistan and Portland. After visiting many supermarkets and secretly breaking into 4 stores and dismantling several brand new cars to get some parts, he finally modified the magic. The parts for the RV are collected. Returning to the endless desert, Li Feng officially began the half-year-long road of magically modifying the RV. The period of magic modification was full of troubles. Li Feng struggled to think of some magic modification solutions, such as how to make the RV fly safely. It was not a question of whether the RV could fly, but how to avoid radar after the RV flew to high altitudes. Question. Li Feng is just a scumbag in elementary school. He doesn't understand this kind of technology. When it comes to how to use magic to avoid satellites and people's sight, Li Feng said that it can be solved by becoming invisible, but the radar thing doesn't make sense. You can't see the RV with the naked eye. It means that the RV does not exist, and the RV can still be found using radio positioning radar. Li Feng knew that if the exterior of the RV was coated with some kind of material that could absorb the wave band, the radar would not be able to detect it, but Li Feng didn't know what the specific name of this material was, where it could be sold, and how much it cost per barrel. With no choice, Li Feng could only inscribe the Muggle-expelling curse on the RV. He comforted himself by thinking that it would be fine if Rifa discovered it. What if the military sent a plane to search for the RV? The pilot would only subconsciously avoid the RV, will only report not seen to the command center. At the same time, in order to prevent the military from bombing the RV with missiles, Li Feng searched for various protective methods in his mind, and painted them on the RV one after another, turning the RV into a mobile fortress. It is no exaggeration to say that Li Feng did not dare to go except to the nuclear explosion site when driving a RV with 7 to 8 lines of defensive magic on its tires. He dared to drive the RV in the center of the battlefield where artillery fire roared, while drinking tea and cakes. While watching the battle between the two armies through the car window. After talking about the defense of the RV, let's talk about Li Feng's masterpiece, which depicts a seamless telescopic cabin and a 4-door storage cabinet with a large internal space. The space in the carriage is modeled after a small private jet, less than 5 meters wide and about 15 meters long. With Li Feng's current materials and knowledge, it is not impossible to expand the carriage space to the extent of parking an aircraft carrier, but it is not necessary. It would be too much trouble. For example, what if Li Feng was whistling and driving his car one day and suddenly his stomach became upset and he wanted to play tuba? Run towards the toilet for half an hour at home, or open a portal to the toilet. Or use Phantom to move to the main account. This is a bit exaggerated. Also, Li Feng didn't want to settle down in the Marvel world. He still wanted to go home and have his wife and children, so the question of finding a girlfriend in the future or whether dating would hurt money didn't even come to his mind. So he and Kriaker were the only two people living in the RV. Why did they need so much space? This little space is enough now. As for the Dementors, just squeeze them into the crowded suitcase. Li Feng didn't want to let them out and bring trouble to the Marvel world, and they would be destroyed by the ancient group. As for the 4-door locker, one of the doors is a herb garden that Kriaker takes good care of. The area is more than 2 football fields. It can be said that most of the extraordinary herbs in Harry's world can be found in this herb garden. Once the herbs are mature, Li Feng has enough herbs to brush up his proficiency in potions. The next door to the herb garden was just an ordinary vegetable garden and utility room at first. In addition to storing some sundries, it only planted some tomatoes and green vegetables that Li Feng liked to eat, and also raised a few hens that lay eggs. But I don't know if Kriaker had a brain seizure or something, saying that drinking fresh milk every day is good for health, and forced Li Feng to get a few cows. With the beginning of the cows, Kriaker was completely crazy, saying that Li Feng's future food sources must not be sprayed with pesticides, and must meet high standards, and then I don't know where to get some cattle and sheep to raise them personally. This is not the end. One time, Kriaker accidentally heard Li Feng, who bought duck necks from Chinatown, chewing them and saying that this thing is delicious. But there are too few and it is very expensive. Kriaker secretly stole a few ostriches from a zoo, saying that the eggs laid by this kind of chicken are not only big and filling, but also have long necks. They can definitely make Li Feng eat duck necks. Li Feng was confused at the time. Ostrich is a bird, chicken is also a bird, but they are not the same species. Besides, he was eating duck necks, not chicken necks. If he was not afraid that Kriaker would go crazy and harm another animal, Li Feng really wanted to tell him that there is an animal called giraffe in this world. The neck of that thing is called long, and after being made into duck necks, one is enough to eat for several days. In this way, while Li Feng was confused, Kriaker forcibly transformed the good vegetable garden into a breeding farm, and the good RV was also transformed by Kriaker into a self-sufficient small base. In addition to these two spaces, there is also a room in the 4-door locker where Li Feng practices magic, and a collection room for Li Feng. However, now in addition to various books recording magic, there are only some small items in the collection room, including the teapot that likes to chase and bite magic flowers. That evening, Li Feng sat cross-legged on the roof of the car, drinking beer leisurely while watching Kriaker sprinkle various seasonings on the roasted lamb legs by the campfire. Just as Kriaker handed Li Feng a piece of sweet and juicy lamb, a portal suddenly appeared next to the campfire. Seeing that the person coming was Gu Yi, Li Feng quickly jumped off the RV and handed the mutton in his hand to Gu Yi, saying, "Master, why are you here? You didn't tell me in advance so that I could prepare more sumptuous food." Kriaker's cooking is a delicacy that cannot be missed. Gu Yi took the mutton with a smile and tasted it. He nodded to Kriaker who was roasting the lamb leg and said, "It is indeed a delicacy that cannot be missed." Hearing the praise, Kriaker bowed slightly to Gu Yi, thanked Gu Yi for his praise, and then turned around to sprinkle the seasoning evenly on the lamb leg, preparing to show better skills to entertain Gu Yi. Li Feng roughly guessed why Gu Yi came, and motioned Gu Yi to go into the RV to take a good look at his home first. After a while, the two walked into the collection room. Ignoring Li Feng's collection, Gu Yi took out the time converter from his arms and returned it to Li Feng, saying with a smile, "I already understand the principle of this little thing, and now I can see everything that happened in the past without the eye of Agamotto." Li Feng's heart jumped, thinking, "Gu Yi wouldn't know my past, right? What did you see?" Gu Yi smiled and shook his head, ignoring Li Feng's question, but said, "Take out your magic book, I will give you the spells I have sorted out." Li Feng was a little confused, not understanding whether Gu Yi knew his origins, but since Gu Yi could teach him the spells to manage time, why should Li Feng be polite, and immediately handed the magic book to Gu Yi. Gu Yi reached out and pointed at the magic book with his finger, picked up the plate in his hand and said, "Do you mind if I take it away and enjoy it slowly?" Not to mention that Li Feng hadn't opened the magic book to check the new time spell, even if he was immersed in the magic world, he wouldn't care about a plate, and nodded and said, "Of course, there is a whole leg of lamb outside. Do you want to take it away?" Gu Yi stretched out his hand to open the portal and shook his head slightly, turning back to Camartage. Seeing Gu Yi leave, Li Feng let out a long breath, threw away the speculation of whether Gu Yi knew his background, and solemnly placed the time converter on a separate collection shelf. This is Li Feng's first precious collection, and it is related to the time field and needs to be properly kept. After casting layers of magic to wrap the time converter, Li Feng couldn't wait to open the magic book and prepare to check the time spell. When Li Feng opened the magic book, he found out that in addition to the spells related to time, Gu Yi also gave Li Feng a craft of making a wand, but Li Feng frowned and scratched his head after reading it. "This is not what I thought." Chapter 93 The Resurrected Corpse. A secret base somewhere of Shield. In a pure white room of less than 30 square meters, Carlson, who was not handcuffed, wore an eye mask and sat upright in front of a metal table with 2 glasses of water and a mobile phone. Opposite Carlson, Fury, who had finally shaved his head and evolved into a braised egg, was reading a detailed information about Carlson, leaning on the back of the chair with his legs crossed, and chewing on a taco. Judging from the speed of eating, Fury has been hungry for a while. Soon, Fury, who had swallowed the last bite of taco, put down the information, picked up the water in front of him, took a sip and said, "Coulson, take off the blindfold." "Okay, sir," Coulson said as he took off his blindfold, wondering where this was. He only knew that he suddenly received a call from Fury after completing a mission. After that, he was led by 2 fully armed special service teams wearing eye masks, flying around in planes and cars to lead the base. Fury picked up the mobile phone on the table, opened a document, stared at Coulson with his only eye, and said with a serious face, "Listen to a recording first and tell me your first feeling." After speaking, Fury pressed play, and Coulson's slightly familiar voice sounded on the phone. This was a recording of Li Feng handing over the Resurrection Corpse technology to Fury in the RV. Soon, the audio ended, and Coulson asked with half certainty and half doubt, "Sir, is this Austin?" Fury nodded, and Coulson said with a bit of surprise and confusion, "What about the content of this recording?" Fury did not answer Coulson's question, but said, "Regardless of the authenticity of the content, after listening to Austin's repeated emphasis on not allowing us to resurrect corpses, and readily handing over a damaged USB flash drive with resurrection technology, what do you think about us?" Coulson recalled briefly and said, "To be honest, my first reaction was not to believe it. After all, resurrection is a bit beyond my imagination." Fury nodded slightly and said, "What if you saw a paper document and a medical expert told you that these resurrection methods are real?" Coulson said without thinking, "Find a way to repair the damaged USB flash drive and then conduct experiments." "It's what I thought at the beginning," Fury said as he stood up, opened the door to the room, and motioned for Coulson to leave the room with him. "When I first learned that Austin had the ability to hypnotize, I took the U-disc back to the base as the first step. The reaction was to find a psychological evaluator to check whether I was hypnotized by Austin, and to determine whether my desire to perform a resurrection experiment after repairing the USB drive was due to my own inner thoughts or the influence of hypnosis." Coulson, who was following Fury, looked at the corridors filled with soldiers and doctors wearing biochemical protective suits, and asked curiously, "What did the evaluator say? And sir, do I know where this is?" Walking to the elevator, Fury pressed the elevator button and said, "The test results showed that I was not hypnotized," but Fury shook the phone in his hand and said, Experts told me that everyone has curiosity and curiosity. In my rebellious mind, the more Austin refused to let me do research, the more it aroused my urge to conduct experiments. Especially when a medical expert told me that resurrection methods were completely feasible, I couldn't be sure that this was not Austin's intention. Hint me something. As for where this is, Fury said with a shrug, I might tell you when you leave. As soon as he finished speaking, the elevator door opened, and Fury walked straight into the elevator and took Carlson all the way underground. The elevator went fast and slow, and after about a minute of falling, it finally opened slowly. This made it impossible for Carlson to tell how deep underground he was. After stepping out of the elevator, Carlson was taken to an operating room by Fury. At Fury's signal, Carlson looked through the glass into the operating room that looked like a slaughterhouse. There were 2 operating tables in the operating room. On one of them lay a corpse of an orangutan with its chest cut open, and on the other was a broken-armed orangutan whose chest was rising and falling, as if it was anesthetized. At Fury's signal, several doctors in the operating room began busy removing the internal organs of the dismembered orangutan and replacing them with internal organs soaked in formalin. Near the end of the operation, Coulson watched in disbelief as the doctors sewed a pair of obviously human arms to the severed arms of the 2 orangutans. Although Coulson guessed that everything in the operating room was related to the resurrected corpse, I still can't figure out how my parents came up with the idea that orangutans have human arms? Coulson said he didn't understand what the operation was. For a long time, Coulson watched the orangutans with human arms being carried into the resurrection equipment, until the anesthetized orangutan lay motionless in the equipment, while the orangutan that was dismembered and resurrected had a blank look on its face and used that when the hands of the 2 human beings scratched his armpits flexibly. Coulson seemed to understand something, and asked with a half-confirmation and half-guessing tone, Sir, is this an experiment to regenerate severed limbs and graft them? Fury pointed at the motionless orangutan, shook his head and said, This experiment is not considered limb grafting. Did you see the orangutan that was just anesthetized before but is now dead? No matter how many times we experiment, it is the only one who can only dead bodies can be grafted with severed limbs and resurrected, and once the original living animals enter the final resurrection process, no one can survive. Judging from the current technology, if one day you are missing arms and legs and want to repair your body, I will have no choice but to shoot you first, sew together the severed limbs you personally selected, and finally resurrect you. Coulson hurriedly shook his head, saying that he was better off alive. Even if his hands and feet were broken, he didn't want to be shot. As for resurrection, Coulson, who saw the orangutan being dismembered with his own eyes, thought it was better to forget it. This made him feel like he was dead. The illusion of being sold at a meat vendor is still the kind that allows doctors to pick and choose. Looking at the strange orangutan that was jumping alive after resurrection and could use human arms flexibly, Coulson looked at Fury again and asked, Sir, are there any side effects of resurrection? Fury nodded, motioned for Coulson to continue following him, and said, We have conducted many animal experiments. Whether it is a chimpanzee or a mouse, the success rate of resurrection is very high. Remember what Austin said in the previous audio? Will corpses lose their memory? We have not found any other side effects in animal experiments. As for whether the animals have lost their memory, it is difficult for us to judge. After speaking, Fury stretched out his hand to open the door of the surveillance room while looking at Coulson, and said quietly, The human resurrection experiment was only done once a few days ago, and the experiment was successful once. After the corpse was resurrected, in addition to losing all memory, we found no other side effects. Coulson was stunned for a moment, and when he was about to ask something, Fury pointed at a man on the surveillance screen with his upper body naked, showing scars all over his body, and he was busy doing barbell squats, and asked, Does it look familiar? Coulson nodded in astonishment and said, Bob Montaigne, a former member of the Special Service Team, was blown off his lower body by a grenade while performing a mission last month. Fury looked at Coulson with an unbelievable expression on his face and said with a smile, Since I got the USB flash drive from Austin, I asked the technical department to repair the USB flash drive while deleting the team to conduct the experiment. It took nearly 2 years. After many experiments on resurrecting animals and constantly improving the resurrection technology, I dared to conduct human experiments some time ago. Coulson, who had been watching the surveillance camera, frowned and said, Sir, the barbell in his hand when he saw Bob lifting the barbell easily. Nearly 500 kilograms, Fury shook his head and said, It's not even close to the Guinness record. Coulson glanced at Fury speechlessly. It didn't reach the Guinness record, but I'm not blind. Bob didn't even take a breath. This was all a joke. Fury saw that Coulson was a little confused. Considering his own arrangements, it would be better to explain some things. He said, the muscles of a living person are controlled by the brain, and the power they can exert is limited. But after resurrection, Bob's the muscle groups are not under the control of the brain. He can exert 100% of his muscle strength, so you see Bob, who is similar to Superman. From the time he took the plane blindfolded, Coulson had always had doubts. Until he saw Bob, who was resurrected and became Superman. Coulson, who felt that his three views had been revised, vaguely guessed something and couldn't help but ask, "Sir, you come to me." Fury. "I will arrange for Bob to be your subordinate, and you will be his inspector. Report everything you see to me at any time. Remember, this mission is not in the record file." As I expected, Coulson nodded and said, "Yes, sir, do you want me to meet with Bob now?" Fury shook his head and looked at Bob under surveillance with a straight face. He didn't know what he was thinking in his heart. After a while, he said, "You have also come into contact with Li Feng's information and saw that he has the ability and location to resurrect corpses." Coulson was stunned for a moment, shook his head and said, "The current information shows that the only valuable thing in Austin is the RV, but I can't see that the RV can hold the equipment to resurrect the corpse, and his academic qualifications are not enough. To support his resurrection experiments, he can sell the resurrection technology to big companies." "Yet, selling to capitalists is a problem," Fury asked with squinted eyes. "Have you heard of any laboratory that has completed experiments on resurrection?" Coulson shook his head. He had never heard of this before, not even suspected rumors. Fury sighed and said, "This is what I can't figure out. If Li Feng gave us the resurrection technology to resurrect the corpse, then why didn't he find a capitalist, even a private sponsor? Why did he give it to us? It can't be my personal charm, right?" Coulson shrugged, saying he couldn't guess. For a long time, Fury said in a joking tone, "Until I don't know Austin's ultimate goal, I am not going to continue to resurrect the corpse, and instead, I will delve into the technology of grafting severed limbs. Once the experiment is successful, we will no longer have disabilities. Soldiers, this can save a lot of pensions." At the same time, Fury added in his heart, "If Austin's purpose is clear, we will even remove the funds for purchasing the cemetery from our expenses." Chapter 94 Bob? As for the understanding of time, Gu Yi is indeed a master among masters. He relied on the working principle of the time converter to organize it into a spell and handed it to Li Feng. It can be said that as long as Li Feng practices step by step, he will be able to return to the past without the time converter one day. However, the time spell that Gu Yi gave to Li Feng is very different from the function of the Eye of Agamotto. The Eye of Agamotto allows you to see countless futures in the outside world, like watching a blockbuster movie at home in bed. Even if this happens outside the Earth, you can enjoy the future while eating popcorn, just like in Avengers 3, Doctor Strange is clearly in Thanos' hometown, but uses the Eye of Agamotto to see Iron Man on the future Earth snap his fingers and kill Thanos. And Li Feng's spell can only see the past and the only future within the range of vision. For example, after some practice, Li Feng still cannot release the time spell for the apple that he has bitten in his hand alone. He can only release the spell to the surrounding environment, so that he can see the time around him accelerating clearly like a ghost, until Li Feng sees the apple being taken into the RV by the future Kreaker and sliced into apple pie and eaten by himself. Among them, the scene where Kreaker made apple pie in the RV was made up by Li Feng, because he could only see the future within his sight, and the scene where Kreaker made apple pie happened in the RV, which blocked Li Feng's sight. He couldn't see whether Kreaker peeled the apple with his hands or with a knife without his eyes of perspective. Unless Li Feng ran into the RV, he couldn't see how the apple was made into apple pie. As for seeing the past, it also made Li Feng speechless. Let's take the apple as an example. What Li Feng saw was not the bitten apple returning to its original state inexplicably, but watching the apple being bitten by his past self. As for the apple's the apple's past was beyond Li Feng's sight, and he couldn't see it at all. Unless Li Feng was bored and had to see more of the apple's past, he could only cast a spell while following the apple, watching the apple return from his hand to the supermarket, to the dealer, and finally standing in the orchard watching the apple return to the apple tree. This made Li Feng a little annoyed. It was useless to only see the only future within his sight. He was not unaware of the plot development. If it wasn't related to time, Li Feng wouldn't bother to practice this useless time spell. The herbs in the medicine garden were cut by clay one after another. Li Feng, who was hiding in a four-door locker and practicing magic except for eating and sleeping, said that he needed to go out for some fresh air, otherwise mushrooms might grow on his head at any time and he would be poisoned by mushrooms, and there was no cure for good mushroom poisoning, so lonely. Walking out of the practice room, Li Feng hesitated when looking at the magic wand and a long stick, and finally picked up the long stick in the corner and put it in his shoulder bag. Speaking of this long stick, Li Feng was actually quite helpless. At the beginning, Gu Yi disassembled countless magic wands and finally understood the manufacturing process of the magic wand. But when Gu Yi put the imitation magic wand into the list of magic tools for his disciples, none of the magicians in Camartage wanted to use the magic wand. At first, Gu Yi was still wondering, the magic wand can increase the success rate of spell casting and the power of spells. It is a good magic tool anyway. Why didn't her disciples even look at it? It was not until Gu Yi asked her disciples for their opinions that she realized that her disciples did not like batons. They preferred to hold sticks and beat the enemy to death when they were close to them. It would be strange if they would use a baton that could not kill people. There was no other way. Gu Yi could only go back to the house to continue researching until she moved the function of the wand to increase the success rate of spell casting to the long and short sticks and strengthened them. Only then did her disciples give her unanimous praise and say that it was very useful. The wand-making process that Gu Yi gave to Li Feng was naturally the magic array engraved on the long and short sticks after modification, and the effect after strengthening was better than the wand. This forced Li Feng to give up the baton and replace it with a long stick. After all, the long stick was more powerful and more convenient. However, there was a slight difference between the long stick made by Li Feng and the magic weapon of Camartage, that is, this long stick was hollow, and Li Feng also took the trouble to engrave the traceless telescopic spell, so that his army of Dementors moved from the crowded suitcases to live in the long stick. This meant that Li Feng, with the long stick, could summon his army at any time. Putting the long stick into the shoulder bag, Li Feng asked Kriaker to look after the house and then reached out to open the portal to Portland, ready to watch a movie and relax. Li Feng, who walked out of a dead end and was looking for a movie theater on the streets of Portland, felt that the atmosphere in the air was a little wrong, especially when Li Feng passed by the door of a musical theater. He noticed that there were many fully armed soldiers hiding nearby, pointing their weapons at the door of the theater. Li Feng, who didn't want to join in the fun, originally wanted to pat his butt and leave. It was just a gunfight. The gunfight in the movie was much more exciting than in reality, and there was nothing to see. It wasn't until Li Feng found that the weapon in the soldier's hand didn't look like a gun at all, but rather like some kind of magnified flashlight, that Li Feng thought blankly, ultraviolet lamp? Is this a scene of soldiers fighting vampires? Li Feng was a little curious. He had been in Marvel for many years, but he had never seen a vampire in reality. He had to doubt whether the vampires had been killed to extinction by Camartage in the Marvel world full of new species. Stopped, Li Feng curiously opened his Dharma eye and looked towards the theater, wanting to see what the vampire's spirit looked like. As a result, he didn't see the vampire, but saw a woman sitting on the stage in the theater, who seemed to be playing a cello, and a zombie with a messy spirit hiding nearby, suspected of protecting the woman playing the cello. The Dharma eye can only see spirits, so Li Feng really can't see the cello, but he has seen the spirit of this kind of zombie. This is a spirit that only people who have been resurrected after death have, and Li Feng in the Marvel world is not only clearly aware of the forces that have the ability to resurrect corpses, but he personally handed over the resurrection technology to them. So what other forces can the zombies in the theater be except those from S.H.I.E.L.D.? Li Feng grinned silently and walked away from the theater door quickly. Coulson is also here, and this lady who seems to be playing the cello is not Coulson's girlfriend, right? Zombies, zombies, do you know how long I have been waiting for S.H.I.E.L.D. to resurrect you? Not far away, Li Feng walked into an empty alley and transformed his coat into a black cloak to cover his whole body. He then pulled out a long stick with the function of a wand and cast the illusion spell. He grinned and cast the apparition movement to fly into the theater from the back door. Flying into the theater, Li Feng glanced at Coulson who was guarding the entrance of the theater, and smiled silently as he quietly wrapped the living corpse Bob into the mirror space. The moment Bob entered the mirror space, he pulled out his pistol without thinking and repeatedly pulled the trigger at Li Feng. When the bullets inexplicably hovered in front of Li Feng, they fell to the ground with a clang after losing kinetic energy. Bob quickly pulled out his dagger and asked with a confused expression, "Superpower? Seeing that Li Feng did not answer his question, Bob glanced at the surrounding space crystal wall and looked at Li Feng, who was circling around him with a wary face. Seeing Li Feng's interested eyes, Bob suddenly had the illusion that he was a commodity hanging on the shelf, allowing Li Feng to check the quality of the goods. When Li Feng got the resurrection technology, he was confused and said he couldn't understand it. This thing belongs to the scientific side and has nothing to do with magic. For this reason, Li Feng even had the idea of sneaking into university to study hard. But later, Li Feng thought that it would be better to practice magic to improve his strength instead of studying. Moreover, he had no money and no equipment to revive corpses. In addition, he was wandering around alone. Why revive the corpse? He didn't lack servants. Even if he wanted to let the resurrected Superman sneak into SHIELD to be a spy for him, he would have to recruit SHIELD and climb up step by step to provide Li Feng with the internal information of SHIELD, but it would take too much time. It is estimated that when the spy climbed up to a high position, he would find that SHIELD was disbanded and provided no information. After thinking about it, Li Feng simply gave the resurrection technology to Fury and asked him to help revive the corpse. Then Li Feng could secretly control the resurrected corpse. Compared to the corpses resurrected by Li Feng, I believe Fury trusts the corpses he resurrects more, and he will feel at ease using them. In addition, the level of the agents resurrected under Fury's nose will not be too low, and the speed of promotion within S.H.I.E.L.D. will be faster in the future. How great it is to have an agent who is S.H.I.E.L.D. in public but belongs to Li Feng in secret. It would be even better if Fury resurrected corpses on a large scale. S.H.I.E.L.D. can be renamed as Li Feng's house. Li Feng was circling around Bob, sighing, "It's not easy, I've been waiting for so many years." "Hey, what's your name? When were you resurrected? How many zombies like you has Fury resurrected?" Bob was stunned, feeling that Li Feng was a psychopathic supernatural person. What he heard was all, resurrection and zombies. Why don't you say zombies destroy the world? Bob ignored Li Feng's question, while observing Li Feng, who seemed to have no resistance, pretending to be confused, and stubbornly asked back, "Who are you?" As soon as the voice fell, Bob pounced on Li Feng like a tiger, ready to use the knife in his hand to make a few holes in Li Feng's body. Li Feng's mouth curled up slightly, and he looked like he was watching a comedy, watching Bob hit his face against an invisible barrier when he was 1 meter away from him. "It really hurts, and it hurts my face," Li Feng teased Bob while pointing the long stick in his hand at Bob. After petrifying him, Li Feng said faintly, "Little guy, do you really think I don't know anything if you don't tell me? You are so naive." After that, Li Feng carved a magic circle on the ground to restrain the devil, and cut his finger and carved a summoning magic circle on the petrified Bob's forehead with blood. After Li Feng finished drawing, he carefully checked the magic circle again to make sure that there was no mistake in the magic circle before opening a portal connecting to the secret place of the theater. After all, the mirror space can isolate the existence of hell. Before the portal is opened, no matter how Li Feng summons, he can't summon the devil. As soon as Li Feng finished summoning, a soul fireball representing the devil rushed into Bob's body from the portal. Seeing this, Li Feng immediately closed the portal and watched the devil slowly occupy Bob's body. After a while, the devil opened his eyes, first looked at the space crystal wall around him, then looked down at the magic circle on the ground, squinted at Li Feng hiding in the black cloak, and asked, "The mirror space of Camartage? I didn't know that the people of Camartage would actively summon the devil. Tell me what your purpose is." Chapter 95 Li Feng and number 039, S internal response. Li Feng frowned. He could tell from the devil's tone that the other party seemed to be quite familiar with Camartage. This was not a good sign. Camartage's attitude towards devils has always been to kill but not bury them, so the devils who are familiar with Camartage are either high-ranking demons or those elite demons who can escape from the mage's pursuit. Whether it's a high-ranking devil or an elite devil, it's not what I want. I just want to summon a little devil to be my spy and shield. In fact, Li Feng is quite depressed now. Compared with the few elite devils, Li Feng has set his target on countless weak devils from the beginning. After all, his slave contract was taught by devils and only used Voldemort. It's just a renovation of the Dark Devil mark. Who knows if those elite devils will find loopholes in the contract and bite back. If there was no way to summon weaker ghosts, Li Feng would not be able to summon the devil. Ghosts are so good, they have neither the cunning nor the strength of the devil. It is a pity that Li Feng has not learned the magic of summoning ghosts, and he does not know where to learn it. It is impossible for Hell to support Li Feng to exchange for a different type of devil or to have a return function. Li Feng can only think, since the summons have come, why don't you try it? It doesn't matter if you fail. It's just an attempt anyway. After all, I don't believe you can detect my identity through the cloak. Li Feng took out the wooden box of pseudo-angel feathers from his shoulder bag, while secretly preparing the spell, and asked, "Who are you?" "Me." The devil seemed to be reading Bob's memory, thinking about something while saying with a half-smile, "Mephisto." Ma Dan and Li Feng's eyes twitched. Without thinking, he opened the wooden box and threw it at the devil. He opened the portal and used Phantom to escape. Suddenly, the devil's heart-rending scream came from behind Li Feng, which made Li Feng a little confused. After all, Mephisto is also the brother of Hell. Even if his strength is greatly reduced in the human world, he cannot be subdued by a pseudo-angel feather. At most, it can delay Li Feng for a few seconds and allow him to escape. In addition, the devil, the possessed body, is a living corpse, so its strength should not be weakened too much. Unless this guy is lying to me. Li Feng, who was about to escape, stopped and glanced at the devil, who was almost out of breath. After hesitating for a moment, Li Feng finally used the hands of a mage to put the pseudo-angel feathers into a wooden box, leaving only a small crack exposed in the wooden box, and asked doubtfully, "You said you are Mephisto?" At this time, the devil seemed to have been thrown into a sulfuric acid pool. His whole body was festering and exuding a stench. He had no strength to answer Li Feng's question. However, when the devil saw Li Feng looking like he was about to open the wooden box, he was so frightened that the corner of his mouth trembled, and he said quickly, "I am Mephisto's loyal subordinate. There is nothing to say." Li Feng swung his long stick and greeted the devil in the face. It was purely physical. After all, it is easy to kill the devil with magic power. Then Li Feng would have to work hard to summon a devil. No. Good deal. While beating him, Li Feng was still cursing, "I'll make you skinny, I'll make you gasp when you talk to me. It scared me so much that I had a heart attack. Are you a loyal subordinate of Mephisto? I'll ask the devil in hell. How many are not loyal to Mephisto?" After fighting for a full 5 minutes, Li Feng held a long stick in one hand and a wooden box in the other and asked, "Now you answer whatever I ask you. If you dare to take a breath, I will open the wooden box and let you dissipate in pain. At worst, I am here. Spend your energy summoning another devil." The devil, who was lying on the ground and still protecting his face, rolled his eyes and nodded, fearing that Li Feng would really kill him, pretending to be surrendered, and said humbly and flatteringly, "Yes, respected mage, what's the problem? Just ask, I'll tell you everything." Li Feng had not dealt with the devil once or twice. He knew that the devil in front of him might be thinking about how to escape or simply kill him, even if he surrendered on the surface. However, Li Feng was not in a hurry. Looking at how badly the devil in front of him had been injured by the pseudo-angel feathers, he expected that the opponent's strength was not much higher. "Tell me your name first, and then what are you doing here?" "Dear Master Mage, the devil's name is long and difficult to pronounce. Just call me Bob." "Bob?" Li Feng squinted at the devil and asked, "Is this the name of your body?" Bob nodded and said, "Yes, sir, Bob Montaigne is the name of this body. He is following his Inspector Carlson here to arrest Marcus Daniels today." Li Feng scratched his head, indicating that he was not impressed by the name, and motioned for Bob to continue. Daniels used to be an assistant in a physics laboratory. An experiment accidentally gave him the ability to absorb any energy. However, due to the instability of his ability, his brain was damaged and he became a member of the neurotic army. Perhaps because of the mental patient's broad thinking and Daniel's abilities, Carlson was unable to find the hiding place of the other party for a while. Fortunately, Daniel seems to be obsessed with Ms. Audrey Nathan, who plays the cello outside the mirror space, which makes Carlson, who is responsible for the capture operation, come up with the idea of using Nathan to lure Daniels to complete the capture mission. After listening to Bob's introduction, Li Feng shrugged his shoulders and said with a smile, "Well, it seems that you do know the memory of this body, and you know it very clearly." Bob was stunned for a moment, and seemed to understand that what Li Feng wanted to ask was not why Shield was here, but, "Your purpose is to know if I have inherited the memory of this body. What else? Do you really think I'm interested in things outside?" Li Feng pointed a long stick at Bob's chest to carve out the slave contract, and said with a smile, "If I hadn't seen Bob, it would have been your body. In the theater, I have already been eating popcorn and watching movies in the cinema. I don't care if a mental patient will harm society. I am not a policeman. Bob felt that he was a devil but had been deceived by humans. Especially when he saw a familiar magic circle on his chest, he panicked. You want to enslave me? Li Feng, who had completed the magic circle, grinned and said, either be my slave or die. By the way, I would like to remind you that this is a mirror space. Once you die, it will completely dissipate. Don't even think about returning to hell. Bob couldn't figure it out. Where did Li Feng, who was obviously a human being, get a slave contract that looked like a devil, and coupled with the inescapable mirror space? Now it was okay, everyone was a slave and I was a fish, and he happily emerged from hell from the beginning. Chong Chong ran to the human world, but ended up becoming a slave. Where could he reason with him? Bob, who wanted to resist but had no strength, could only sign a contract with Li Feng obediently, hoping to find out the loopholes in the contract before escaping from Li Feng's control. For now, it would be better to become Li Feng's spy and shield, at least for a little while. Life was saved. Even if Bob became his slave, Li Feng only breathed a sigh of relief on the surface, but still did not relax his vigilance in his heart. Li Feng played with the wooden box in his hand and asked, "Tell me about your status in hell." Bob raised his rotten right hand and said, "Dear Master, can you please let me get in touch with hell first so that I can regain some strength and prevent Carlson from seeing me like this after I leave the mirror space?" Appearance. Li Feng looked at Bob with a half-smile, stretched out his hand to open the portal, and said, "Want to try if you can return to hell? It doesn't matter, just try, I won't stop you." Bob didn't seem to hear Li Feng's voice. He lowered his head and contacted hell to restore his strength. He whispered, "Master, a weak devil like me has no status in hell. If I hadn't followed I have gained experience around the Lord, and I don't even know the slave contract." Bob said a bunch of bits and pieces, and in summary he was a useless devil with neither strength nor influence. As for whether Li Feng believed it or not, that was not within Bob's consideration. Li Feng didn't care if Bob was a loser. He wished Bob was a loser. It was just the devil's words. If one of the 10 sentences was true, it would be good. In view of the distrust, Li Feng ordered Bob to be his shield agent as usual and not to contact him without authorization except to deliver news through the slave contract. Before leaving the mirror space, Li Feng thought for a while and said, "Turn your head away, children, don't look around, you will get needle eyes." After saying that, Li Feng closed the portal and reopened it, shouting to Kreaker outside the portal, "Come here and help me." "Yes, boss." Kreaker blinked, walked to Li Feng and said, "Boss, what are your orders?" Li Feng pointed at Bob, who had his face turned away from him, and said, "You will sign the unbreakable curse with him later, and I will be the witness. Do you understand?" Kreaker nodded, walked to Bob's side, grabbed his palm and looked at Li Feng. Li Feng put the long stick between Bob and Kreaker's handshake, and made Bob, who had always closed his eyes, promise not to reveal this meeting or reveal his identity. After a series of unequal promises, the long stick shot out tongues of fire and entangled the two. Palm. Li Feng knew that the spell had been established, waved his hand for Kreaker to leave, and said to the somewhat confused Bob, "Open your eyes. Let me remind you that once you violate the promise you made before, you will not even have a chance to return to hell, dissipates directly." Although Bob didn't know what kind of magic the oath just made was, he cherished his life and said that he would never dare to break it, and said humbly, "Master, should I return to my post now? I'm afraid Carlson will stay in the mirror space for too long. Will become suspicious." At this time, outside the mirror space, a man seemed to be immersed in the sound of Nathan's cello. He walked towards Nathan with his eyes closed. Without Bob's reminder, Li Feng knew that this man must be the target of Carlson's arrest this time. The mentally ill patient Marcus Daniels, otherwise how could anyone come into the theater that was semi-blocked by SHIELD? Li Feng reached out to open the portal and signaled Bob to get out, while he returned to the RV. A good relaxing trip turned into a trip to summon the devil. Li Feng said that he needed Kreaker's delicious food to relieve his slightly nervous mood just now. Chapter 96 Missing Stark. Although Daniels can absorb any energy, including brain waves, electric pulses and other means of turning people into corpses, as long as he is still human, the total amount of energy he can absorb will have an upper limit, which also makes Carlson and others people have the means to capture, such as using something like a flashlight in their hand, forcing Daniels to absorb a large amount of energy. causing him indigestion or body overload, etc., in order to achieve the purpose of capturing him alive. After all, Coulson looks like a good old guy. His purpose is to help Daniels return to normal, not to kill. At the end of the mission, Coulson walked up to Bob and asked, "Do you have anything to say to me? I feel you are a little tired." "What kind of fatigue is Bob?" "He is quite tired. Which devil can face the pseudo-angel feathers and still feel relaxed? He's not Mephisto." It's just that Bob didn't dare to say this. Who knows what the consequences will be if he violates the promise he made clearly under the witness of magic. Bob shrugged, breathed a long sigh of relief, and said calmly, "I just felt a little emotional when I saw Daniels. After all, I am a monster like him. I don't even have any memory. Apart from following you to kill and kill, I am still fighting. Fighting and killing, it feels like this life is just like this, just a life of a monster." Coulson patted Bob on the shoulder and said in a gentle tone, "You are not a monster, but a teammate I trust, and you were a member of the special team before, but..." Bob smiled bitterly and said, "Stop, I was only blown up half of my body during the mission. Fortunately, the medical team rescued me in time, but I lost my original memory because of my brain injury." Spreading his hands, Bob pointed to his heart, said with a slightly helpless tone, "You and my previous teammates have said this 800 times, and I have also destroyed the information about me before the accident, but I still feel like I turned into a monster after being treated by you." Coulson scratched his brows and said, "Okay, maybe I have given you too many tasks recently and put you under too much pressure. Do you need me to give you a big holiday to go fishing outdoors?" "No need," Bob rolled his eyes and said, "When I was fishing last time, I noticed a group of medical team members hiding in the distance. I don't want to go through it again. It makes me feel like I'm already old. The illusion of having to use a cane to go out." After saying that, Bob was about to walk out of the theater, looking like he needed to lie down in the car to have a good rest. In fact, the devil didn't want to have too many conversations with Coulson before digesting Bob's memories. After all, Coulson was also an agent. It is easy to find the flaws in the words. Just as Bob was about to leave the theater, Coulson's faint voice came from behind, "Have you seen Austin?" Bob was stunned, wondering if Austin was the previous mage, and pretending to be asked, he turned to look at Coulson with a confused expression, and asked, "Sir, who is Austin? Is he my former mage?" "Friends." Coulson smiled and shook his head, "Nothing, go and rest." It wasn't until Bob got in the car and closed the door that Coulson pressed the communication area in the cochlea and said, "Sir, did you hear that?" On the other end of the communicator, Fury sat at his desk with his cell phone, repeatedly watching the video of Li Feng suddenly appearing in Portland and passing by the theater door. Li Feng was also quite helpless. Although he knew that he was on Fury's list, he didn't know who was in the theater when he passed by it. He didn't react until he saw Bob and Coulson, but by then his face had already caught by nearby agents and cameras. What can he do? The agent can also shoot Forgotten to make them forget about themselves, but what effect will Forgotten have on releasing the camera? Is it possible that the camera can learn to shake its head and shyly say to Fury, "I won't let you see other people's content"? Fury, aside from being tired, is there anything unusual about Bob? Nothing has been found yet, Coulson thought for a while and said, "Sir, are you sure Austin will sneak into the theater quietly to meet Bob instead of simply passing by the theater?" "I trust my intuition, how about we make a bet?" "I'll bet $10 that Austin has already met Bob." Fury leaned back in his chair and said with a confused look on his face, "When Austin used the resurrection technology when he handed it over to us, I knew he had another purpose. Now Austin has appeared near the theater, and then Bob showed weakness, which has proved my guess from the side, unless Bob is so bored that he dares to hide during the task. Venting excess energy with fingers in the corner, now I want to figure out how Austin talked to Bob, and whether force was used during the conversation, otherwise why was Bob inexplicably weak, and what did they talk about? Is there any suspicion of cooperation?" Coulson, knowing that his parental paranoia had relapsed, glanced at Bob in the distance, thought for a moment, and whispered, "Do you want me to take Bob back to the base for a psychological examination? After all, Austin can hypnotize." "Of course we need to check," but Fury paused, refreshed the computer page, opened the information of a psychological counselor named Andrew Garner, and said, "This time, we will find a better expert to do the check, so Bob's check let me arrange it." "Yes, sir," Coulson hesitated and asked, Austin appears on the streets of Portland. Do you need me to look for him? Fury took a deep breath and exhaled it slowly, reopened the surveillance video, and watched Li Feng, who was wearing a casual suit with a bulging belly, suddenly walk out of a dead end. Fury was very sure that Li Feng suddenly appeared in the dead end, because even if he rewound the surveillance video for 48 hours, he didn't see Li Feng walking into the alley, unless Li Feng was bored to the point of being in a daze in this dead end, and was in a daze for more than 48 hours, but this was impossible. Fury was complaining about how much trouble Li Feng's ability to run around the world caused him, and said faintly, Austin seems to have the ability to open a wormhole, how do you want to find him? And that guy doesn't even have a mobile phone, and he can't use satellite positioning. I almost doubt whether he came from a primitive tribe. Carlson frowned, and just when he was about to ask something, he heard Fury sigh and say, Carlson, do you know how much money it costs to find a guy who can appear in your house or my bedroom at any time? Before Carlson answered, there was a knock on Fury's office, and Fury looked at the door said to Carlson, take Bob back to the base as soon as possible. After that, Fury put down the phone and said to the door, come in. Maria Hill, Fury's right-hand man, pushed open the office door expressionlessly, handed a document to Fury, and said, we are in trouble, Tony Stark is missing. Fury was stunned. Given Stark's well-known playboy status, he often hooked up with women for a spontaneous bed trip. It was normal for him to disappear. After all, no one wanted to be surrounded by people watching when they were having fun. Fury couldn't help but tease, well, which woman did our weapons expert Mr. Stark disappear with this time? Hill pointed to the information and said, I'm afraid it's not what you think this time. He disappeared when he was returning in a jeep after demonstrating new weapons in Afghanistan. When the military arrived at the scene, they only found the wreckage of soldiers and vehicles, but Stark was missing. Although it is temporarily impossible to determine what force attacked the military, this group of people is obviously going after Stark. Afghanistan. Fury narrowed his eyes, opened the information, and quickly browsed it while asking, from your tone, what is the chance of Stark's survival now? It's quite big. Who else knows about Stark? Hill tilted his head and said with a little helplessness on his face, this matter is quite big. The military can't block the news. It is estimated that the headline of tomorrow's newspaper will be about Stark's disappearance. This is in line with Stark's character. He always occupies the headlines of newspapers. Fury scratched his forehead a little irritably, put down the information in his hand and ordered, find Stark, who is in constant trouble, as soon as possible. After speaking, Fury picked up the phone and waited for Carlson to answer the call and said, emergency mission. On the other side, Li Feng returned to the RV and enjoyed the food, and then he dived into various magic books. Most of these books were looted by Li Feng from Harry's world, but the number was a bit large. Today, after several years, Li Feng still hasn't finished reading half of them. Of course, this is also related to Li Feng's habit of digesting the knowledge in the book before reading the next book. After all, these are all magic knowledge. Any slight mistake in understanding will have unimaginable consequences. Li Feng doesn't want to die or become disabled inexplicably. However, this time, Li Feng, who was studying hard, had an unexpected reward. He found a weakened version of the magic amplification potion formula in the book. Although this formula is only 1/10 of the effect of the original version, and there are side effects such as dizziness after use and inability to use it repeatedly, the medicinal materials in the formula are common. The most important thing is that potions can improve strength faster than simple hard work. Holding the formula that he had looted from some unlucky guy's house, Li Feng rushed into the medicine garden with excitement and handed the formula in his hand to Kriaker and asked, Kriaker, do we have the medicinal materials in the formula? Kriaker looked at the formula, and then looked at the medicinal materials that had been processed but piled in the corner to mold, and said, Boss, except for the ordinary medicinal materials used as auxiliary materials, the rest of the extraordinary medicinal materials are available. Li Feng scratched his head and looked at the ordinary materials in the formula. Fortunately, the auxiliary medicinal materials in the formula can be bought on the market. Li Feng resisted the urge to grin wildly, stretched out his hand to open the portal to Portland, and ordered, Kriaker, prepare the herbs according to the recipe. In fact, Li Feng didn't need to order. Kriaker, who was familiar with Li Feng's character, had already consciously selected the herbs on the recipe, so that Li Feng, who bought the herbs, could start brewing the potion at any time when he returned to the RV. In the next 3 months, Li Feng, who was devoted to brewing the potion, finally wasted many herbs and made the first weakened version of the magic amplification potion. Looking at the charming azure potion in the test tube, Li Feng thought about it, raised his head and drank a small sip. After all, he didn't know how to brew the potion. In case of accidents, Li Feng thought it would be better to try it in a small sip. After a while, Li Feng, who felt a little drowsy, realized that this was the weakened version of the potion. While shaking his dizzy head, he asked Kriaker to hold up a parasol in the desert so that he could lie on the beach chair in the sun to digest the potion. After a while, Kriaker walked up to Li Feng with a fruit platter, looked at the figure in the distance in confusion, and said, "Boss, there are guests coming towards us." Chapter 97 The beginning of Iron Man. Stark felt that he should check the almanac carefully and choose an auspicious day before going out. He was so unlucky. He just came to Afghanistan to show the military his latest weapons and show off his talents. Why was he attacked by a group of terrorists for no reason? It was okay to die on the spot after being attacked, and it was okay to be saved by a doctor, but what about putting a magnet on the chest to save his life? Stark said that the doctor's skills were not good, which seriously affected his efficiency in picking up girls. This is too ugly. This is not the end. I don't know what these terrorists think. They actually asked him to build weapons in a dark cave and asked him to use hand tools such as hammers and wrenches to knock out the weapons. Stark said on the spot that there were no missiles. But there were nonsense, so he asked the terrorists if they wanted them. As a result, Stark, who didn't recognize the reality, was taught a lesson by the terrorists. He realized that his life was in the hands of others and Stark had no choice. What could he do? He could only use his hands to knock out the energy hanging on his chest, which was both beautiful and life-saving, and then busy with the weapons the terrorists wanted. It's just that the weapon Stark wanted to knock out was slightly different from what the terrorists wanted. The terrorists wanted missiles, but what Stark wanted to knock out was steel armor for escape. Fortunately, the cultural level of this group of terrorists was so low that they couldn't tell the difference between missiles and armor, which gave Stark the opportunity to knock out the armor. Now, Stark finally drove the armor he had worked so hard to knock out, and killed countless terrorists and got out of the cave where he had been imprisoned for 3 months. However, Stark, who had escaped from the cave, found that not only did he not see the terrorists who were scared to death by his armor outside the cave, but he saw the terrorists greet him with more intense guns and cannons, which made Stark unhappy. He immediately said that he was outnumbered, or that it was better to keep the Green Mountains and not worry about firewood. He ignited the ammunition stored in the open air and retreated strategically. Fortunately, Stark designed a flight mode when he used a hammer to knock on the armor, so that the terrorists who could only run on the ground could not track him for a while. However, this armor was handmade after all, and both the flying speed and energy were limited. After a while, Stark was forced to return to the ground and continue to escape on the hot sand. Stark, thirsty and tired, ran for most of the day, and suddenly saw a motorhome in the distance ahead. Stark was stunned. If he saw a motorhome in a beautiful environment, he would understand that people were on vacation, but in the deep desert, let's not talk about how the motorhome avoided the quicksand and drove into the deep desert, let's just say who would drive the motorhome into the desert for vacation. There was nothing to see except sand. Mirage, it must be a mirage. He thought so, but since the motorhome appeared in front of him, in the same direction as he had set before, Stark still ran towards the motorhome while praying that it was a real motorhome. After a while, Stark was sure that what he saw was indeed an illusion, otherwise how to explain the mirror image in the distance. Under a huge parasol, someone was lying on a beach chair eating something, and there was a servant next to him who was suspected to be either a child or a dwarf. Li Feng was stunned when he heard Kriaker say that someone was walking towards him in the distance. His RV had a muggle-repelling charm. Except for special people with energy in their bodies, ordinary people could not see his existence. Li Feng looked curiously in the direction Kriaker pointed. Although his drowsy brain had been relieved a lot as the potion was absorbed, the figure in the distance was still a bit blurry. It was not until Stark kept approaching the RV that Li Feng realized that this was Tony Stark by the iconic headlights on his chest. At the same time, Li Feng also understood why this guy could see the RV. The headlights on his chest were not just to save his life. In Avengers 1, Loki wanted to control Stark's thoughts with the Mind Gem, but it was all blocked by this headlight. That was the Mind Gem. Did it not want to save face or felt that it could not withstand Stark's protagonist plug-in, allowing Stark to ignore him? It can be seen how powerful this headlight is. Now, Stark just ignored the muggle repelling charm. Li Feng said he understood, but... Li Feng watched Stark approach the RV step by step, and then inexplicably watched him hit his face against the RV compartment. Li Feng scratched his head, looked at Kriaker, and then looked at Stark, who was rubbing his nose and looking confused, with a look like a mentally retarded person, and asked, "Mr. Stark, didn't you see the RV?" Stark's head hurts now, not because of hitting the RV, but when he saw that Kriaker was obviously not a human and judged that the other party was not a simulated robot, he guessed that he had been detained by terrorists for too long, causing too much mental pressure and hallucinations. If Stark simply imagined the RV, he said he could bear it. After all, he really wanted to rest now, and the RV was a good choice, but what he couldn't bear was that he, a playboy, actually imagined a man. Is he no longer interested in women? Originally, this was nothing, just a small hallucination. He could find a good doctor to treat it after returning home with his financial resources. But not to mention the RV that he thought was an illusion. What was the situation when Li Feng spoke? His ears and eyes clearly told him that what he saw was not an illusion. This is really terrible. Stark rubbed his nose and looked at Kriaker blankly. He had the illusion that he was not being imprisoned for 3 months, but for hundreds of years. Otherwise, when would a creature like Kriaker appear on Earth? It must have been a few hundred years later that humans rushed out of the Earth and captured the aliens. Only then did he see the aliens serving the Earthlings in front of him like servants. Stark looked a little confused and asked, "Who are you? Where are you? What time is it?" Li Feng rubbed his dizzy head. He didn't understand at all what year Stark wanted to ask. He just motioned Kriaker to go back to the RV and hand the electronic clock to Stark for him to read. After all, Li Feng didn't know. What time is it now? It's still some time before dinner anyway. Li Feng looked at Stark all over his body, frowned and asked, "Did you just escape from the terrorists? Who are you?" Stark hadn't had time to inform others about the terrorists. It could be said that no one except the terrorists had his whereabouts. How did the people in front of him know? Unless he is also a member of the terrorists. Thinking of this, Stark first glanced at Li Feng, confirming that the opponent had no firearms, and then scanned the surroundings to find some suitable weapons in case the drug-addicted guy in front of him suddenly attacked. Li Feng pointed at himself and said, "Me? You can call me Austin. I am a mage." Stark frowned. He realized that he had made a mistake. The person in front of him was not a terrorist. He was definitely a psychopath. Think about it, who else would go to the depths of the desert to bask in the sun, except for the mentally ill? How much sunscreen does this need to be applied, or is this neurotic thinking too broadly and preparing to support a sunscreen factory on his own? Li Feng saw from Stark's deep contempt that the other party obviously didn't believe what he said. After thinking about it, Li Feng lightly snapped his fingers and released the healing spell on Stark. Just when Stark felt an inexplicable warmth all over his body and saw his skin wounds healing quickly, he heard Li Feng smile and say, "This is a healing technique, but it can only treat your wounds." Li Feng pointed at Stark's palladium metal reactor, shrugged and said, "I can't treat this thing right away, just like fractures and other injuries can only be treated by straightening the bones." Stark, who had personally experienced the healing technique, shook his head, trying to make sure he was still immersed in the world of hallucinations. However, even if Stark shook his brain out of his head, Li Feng was still standing in front of him. After all Stark's injuries were treated by Li Feng, Stark said with an uncertain tone, "Mage." Then he turned around and looked at Kriaker, who came out of the RV with an electronic clock to make sure that he had not traveled through time. After being confused, he said, "What is this little guy?" "Your magic servant. Magic is just an unknown science. There are so many things you haven't seen before." Li Feng explained casually. As for why Li Feng didn't want to explain clearly what magic is, he could remember that when he explained the principles of magic to a certain scientist before, the other person directly put on a posture of breaking the casserole and asking for the truth. Li Feng was so annoyed that he felt like his ears were flying, buzzing like countless flies. Coupled with Stark's talent and his desire to plan for a rainy day, it is estimated that when Li Feng explained what magic was that day, this guy built the anti-Li Feng armor the next day. After giving Stark a look of disbelief, Li Feng extended his hand to invite Stark into the RV and said, "As for Kriaker, he is my house elf, and it is correct to say he is my magical servant." Stark thought for a while, and intuitively speaking, the chance of Li Feng being a terrorist was not high. Even if Li Feng was a terrorist, Stark would not be afraid. At worst, he could subdue the opponent and then escape in the RV. I believe that with the help of the RV, it would be better than using 2 pairs of hands. There's a greater chance that the legs will leave the desert. As for the identity of the wizard, the stubborn and arrogant Stark will not believe it easily. Stark, who was walking towards the door of the RV, seemed to remember something and said, "So Mr. Mage with a belly, what will you do when you face a terrorist with a heavy machine gun?" Before Stark finished speaking, Li Feng smiled and looked at Stark with a funny expression like he had seen a ghost, then turned around and got out of the car to look at the carriage. When Stark returned to the RV with an obviously excessive space with an expression of disbelief, he asked in confusion, "Is this space expansion technology?" "It's whatever you say," Li Feng shrugged, picked up the long stick in the corner, and said while touching it, "Let's talk about where the terrorists are. My little pets are already hungry and thirsty." Stark rubbed Lu's forehead. He had felt a pain in his head since he saw Li Feng. "Let's not talk about healing and space technology. After all, science can do it." But the other party looked like he was ready to use a broken stick to find someone with a gun. "What is the operation of molecule trouble? Do you really think of yourself as a mage? This is so damn sick." Before Stark could answer, Kriaker, who was about to pour water for Stark, suddenly raised his ears and turned his head to look in one direction and said, "Boss, I heard the sound of a car approaching." Li Feng grinned and walked out of the RV holding the wooden stick. Stark looked at Li Feng speechlessly, then at the driver's seat, thinking tangledly, should I wait for this lunatic to be reduced to a pulp and then escape in the RV, or should I start running away in the RV now? Chapter 98 Let's have dinner. Stark ultimately failed to escape in the RV after Li Feng got off the car, not because he didn't want to, but because he couldn't. The first is that there is no key in the RV. Although Stark believes that he can start the RV without a key, it will take time. It is estimated that by the time he starts the car, the terrorists have already boarded the RV with guns. Secondly, no matter how he looked at it, Stark felt that the RV could not outrun the military jeep in the hands of the terrorists. It was estimated that when the terrorists caught up with him, he would inevitably get another beating. Stark, who did not want to be tortured by terrorists even if he was killed, watched with regret through the car window how Li Feng was shot to death, while mentally preparing himself to face death in despair. It's just that the next development was completely different from what Stark had imagined. Stark stared inexplicably as hundreds of black shadows floated out of the long stick in Li Feng's hand, while the terrorist's gun was still aimed at Li Feng, stunned. Found this group of black shadows. The drop in temperature caused by the appearance of the Dementors made Stark feel a little ridiculous. He didn't understand when the desert would become cold in the daytime. Stark subconsciously rubbed his arms to keep warm, and asked Kriaker, who was also lying on the car window, "Little guy, what are those black shadows? Why do I think I will never laugh in this life?" Kriaker looked at the Dementors flying in the sky and Li Feng's tall back with admiration and fear, and said, "Those are Dementors, a group of the most evil creatures in the world. They suck happiness. They are also responsible for the cold you feel of." After releasing the Dementors, Li Feng looked at the terrorists with a smile and used the language of the dead to order the Dementors to resist their desire to eat and simply surround the terrorists. For a long time, Li Feng was either in the RV or casting magic on the sand, resulting in some spells that he had not practiced at all, such as legilimency or the transformation spell used on living people. Now that he has encountered a group of terrorists who do not know whether to live or die, Li Feng certainly does not want to miss the opportunity to test the power of the spell. Li Feng, who held up the shield, ignored the suspected warnings coming from the terrorists' mouths and directly used the transformation technique on a terrorist who didn't like it. When the human suddenly turned into a skunk, the surrounding terrorists were no longer scary. Instead, they cried for their fathers and mothers with frightened expressions. Shouting words such as wizard and devil while desperately buttoning up Trigger hoped to kill Li Feng and fled in panic. How could Li Feng let go of the test subject that was finally delivered to his door so easily? Turn directly into black mist, use phantom movement to catch up with the fleeing terrorists, and detect spells such as legilimency and Avada Kedavra one by one. After a long time, Li Feng gained more or less experience in using phantom movement while casting spells. He felt that if he continued to detect the terrorists, he would kill the terrorists. He could only regretfully stop his hand and shout into the air in the language of the dead, "Prosperity, let's eat." As soon as the Dementors, who had been starving for a long time, heard dinner is ready, they all floated to the terrorists to take a big gulp of happiness. In the RV, Stark, who knew about Dementors from Kriaker, looked curiously at how the Dementors absorbed happiness. He saw the terrorists first crying like their boss was dead, and then lying on the ground one by one. Finally, Li Feng's green light shot from the long stick ended the lives of the group. After watching a battle between mages and terrorists, Stark felt that his mind was a little confused and he needed to sort out his views. Rather than believing that Li Feng is a mage, Stark believes that Li Feng is an alien with superpowers. After all, neither the space expansion technology nor the unknown species of creature in front of him are owned by the Earth. When Li Feng stood at the door of the RV carrying a long stick, Stark couldn't wait to ask, "Are you sure you are from Earth?" "Nonsense," Li Feng rolled his eyes, pointed at his public face, and said, "Have you ever seen such a handsome alien?" Stark looked at Li Feng's belly, shook his head, and said, "I have never seen a pregnant male Earthling." "Li Feng, damn it, I can't handle this piece of fat." Putting the long stick aside casually, Li Feng looked out the window and asked, "You attracted so many terrorists? My pet's teeth are not even filled." Stark spread his hands speechlessly and said, "I don't even have a weapon to protect myself. How can you help me lure the mobs for you? For the sake of me bringing dry food to your pets, can you lend me some? For phone use." "Phone?" Li Feng said jokingly as he sat in the driver's seat and started the RV with a snap of his fingers. "What is that? What is it used for? Is it edible or can it help you kill terrorists?" In fact, when the RV started up, Stark had blocked out Li Feng's jokes and stared blankly through the car window at the ground, getting further and further away from him. "Is this a plane?" Stark subconsciously opened the car window with a confused expression. He wanted to see if there was any projection on the car window that gave him the illusion that the RV could fly. After opening the ordinary transparent car window, Stark, as a technology expert, immediately concluded that the sound buzzing in his ears was the sound of a car engine, not an aircraft engine as he had previously thought. Seeing this, Stark shrugged, walked behind Li Feng and looked at the car dashboard speechlessly, saying, "Okay, I understand that you are a mage and can do magic, but what does it mean that a RV that is obviously a product of technology can fly? Also, please tell me, what do you mean by using the car steering wheel to control the plane? Where is your plane joystick?" Li Feng turned to look at Stark, blinked and said, "I only have a car driver's license, so I drive a car. Is it okay to install an airplane control stick on an RV? What if the police stop me and ask for my airplane driver's license? As for why does the RV fly when it is obviously a car? Maybe the RV has a heart to let itself go?" Stark was stunned for a moment, and then understood the purpose of Li Feng's joke with him. He rolled his eyes and said with a smile, "Car driver's license? Are you planning to lay off the aircraft instructor? In the future, you can become a pilot by taking the car driver's license? But I like your idea. Need a sponsor? Let's make a fortune together." Hearing Stark joking with himself, Li Feng smiled and said, "It seems that you have taken a small step out of the shadow of terrorists. How are my skills as a psychotherapist?" Stark looked down at the trauma on his body, curled his lips and said, "It seems reliable to treat trauma. As for the psychological aspect, I think it is my own inner strength. It has nothing to do with you making me happy. In other words, you are really no phone." "I really don't have a phone," Li Feng spread his hands to express his helplessness and said, "I have no friends and no family. I am hiding in the desert just to practice magic quietly by myself. Why do I need a phone?" Stark glanced at the carriage, tilted his head and asked, "Don't you have space expansion technology? Can't you rent a house in the city and renovate it so that you have enough space to practice magic? What will you eat and drink while hiding in the desert? What? Don't tell me that you are a mage, you can fabricate these living supplies out of thin air." Li Feng scratched his forehead thoughtfully, snapped his fingers and let the RV drive automatically. He got up and took Stark to the 4-door locker, motioning for Stark to open it and take a look. Stark looked at the self-driving steering wheel with twitching eyes. "Okay, this is magic." Then, Stark opened the cabinets in confusion, stared blankly at the lockers with chickens, ducks, and cows running all over the floor, and then looked at the lockers that looked normal in size, and said speechlessly, "I think it is necessary to say just a few words. Have you been offended by the flying instructor? Let's just let this line go and let's study how to get into real estate. Why does it sound like the real estate developer has offended you?" Li Feng said jokingly, "But then again, you and them are really not the same people. They build buildings, but you, a weapons manufacturer, destroy them. Building people are naturally difficult to deal with." Stark gave a fake smile, slowly exhaled, and said, "No, from now on in my life label, the title of weapons dealer will no longer apply to me." After speaking, Stark seemed not to want to continue the topic of weapons and said, "Is there anything to eat? I feel more and more hungry when I see these vegetables." Li Feng pointed to the tomatoes in the four-door locker and motioned to Stark to pick a few for his stomach. He turned and shouted, "Kriaker, prepare dinner, our guests are hungry." "Yes, boss, Kriaker will be ready soon." Stark picked a few tomatoes casually, not caring whether they were dry or not. He opened his mouth and bit them. While eating, he curiously looked at Li Feng's farm. He said with an expression of deep interest in magic, "The cabinet next to it, what's inside the door?" "What's there?" "There are so many things," Li Feng shrugged and said, "the kind that can knock your three senses to the ground and make you unable to fight back." Li Feng's words aroused Stark's curiosity and asked, "Can I visit?" "Of course." Li Feng casually opened the cabinet door of the collection room and said, "Welcome to my magical world." After a while, Stark, who walked into the collection room, said that he was eye-opening. However, compared to the magic props placed on the shelves, Stark was more curious about the time turner with its independent collection rack and asked, "What is this?" "Very precious." Li Feng resisted the desire to laugh wildly and explained the function of the time turner to Stark with a calm face. He especially emphasized the relationship between time and the quantum realm. He wanted to tell Stark about using quantum energy to travel through time in Women's Federation 4. Other side. Speaking of this, we have to mention Li Feng's purpose. If it was just to send Stark home, Li Feng said it was just a trivial matter. However, he did not send him home immediately. Instead, he found ways to tease Stark. Kay was happy. All this was because Li Feng wanted to have a relationship with Stark. As long as he becomes friends with Stark, Li Feng can't help but fantasize in his heart, "I believe the time turner will arouse your interest. Once you set foot in the quantum realm, you have to give me some information. But you are not enough. I need to find an opportunity to show off my magic in front of Dr. Pym and ask him to help me understand quantum energy, so that I don't know anything about the time travel gate." Chapter 99 Chapter 99 Return to New York. Just when Stark looked confused and wondered if Li Feng had any misunderstandings about the quantum realm and the magic realm, Li Feng untied the layers of magic on the collection shelf, picked up the time turner and said, "Want to try traveling through time?" Before Stark could say anything, Kriaker knocked on the cabinet door and said, "Boss, Kriaker has prepared dinner for you." Li Feng casually hung the time converter around his neck and said, "Okay, I will show you the feeling of traveling through time later, and by the way, I will take the opportunity of eating to tell you the rules that need to be followed when traveling through time. I don't want to do it because you don't know how to travel through time. I knew the rules and disrupted time, but I ended up being hunted by a group of mages. The world is big, and eating is the biggest." Plus Li Feng said so. Stark immediately put the doubts in his mind behind him. After all, his mind was messed up today and he needed a good rest. At the dinner table, Kriaker prepared 4 dishes and 1 soup according to Li Feng's past tastes. The only difference between today and before was that he had an extra pair of chopsticks. As for whether Stark knew how to use chopsticks, this was not within the scope of Kriaker's consideration. I don't know if Stark is really hungry or if Kriaker's cooking skills are too good. While eating the delicious food, Stark gave Kriaker a thumbs up and said, "Kriaker, do you want to change to a more promising job? I can give you 10 times your salary as long as you are my personal chef." Kriaker, who was cleaning up the kitchen, immediately turned his face when he heard Stark's words, lowered his head and cursed, "Damn mudblood, you insulted Kriaker, damn it, damn it. Kriaker." Li Feng saw that Kriaker had relapsed into his old habit and had to say loudly, "Go and see the medicine garden." Stark looked at Kriaker who looked angry, then looked at Li Feng, and asked doubtfully, "What did I say wrong? Although I don't know what mudblood means, this word is obviously not a compliment to me." It wasn't until he saw Kriaker cursing and walking into the 4-door cupboard that Li Feng explained truthfully, "House elves are the special servants of mages. They pride themselves on being able to serve mages without taking any compensation. You just mentioned wages. This is an insult to Kriaker." Stark scratched his forehead, shrugged and said, "The more you say that, the more I want to find a house elf to serve me. After all, after listening to you talk about the theory related to quantum and time, the more I feel that magic is an unknown energy. An energy can be controlled by science. Unfortunately, I have the financial resources and ability to produce and control energy. This means that I am also a mage, right? Li Feng curled his lips, raised his glass and saluted Stark from afar. Mage is really good at controlling energy. In his heart, Li Feng silently added, controlling energy is only one of the methods of a mage. A mage is not a short-lived species. This is the difference between a mage and a scientist. After drinking and eating, Stark watched the RV flying at the speed that a car should have, and said disdainfully, your RV has entered the field of aviation, can't it fly at the speed that an airplane should? If it's a broken car like yours, if the flight speed continues, I don't have to wait for me to return home. I'll probably hear the news about the bankruptcy of Stark Group as soon as I step out of the desert. Are you in a hurry? I told you earlier. Li Feng pretended to be enlightened, stood up and said, where are you going? Stark thought that the RV could really speed up, and said happily, in the United States, even a nearby airport will do. Then I will call and ask my private jet to take me back to the company, and let you see what an airplane should have speed. Li Feng stretched out his hand to open the portal and said with a grin, while you have time to call, we have already arrived in New York. As soon as Li Feng finished speaking, Stark found that he was already over New York after passing through the orange aperture. Stark took a deep breath with a slightly surprised expression, raised his hands in a gesture of surrender, and said, okay, magic, I understand, but one day I will use technology to prove that this is just the application of wormhole theory. In addition, I have to remind you, there are no flying RVs in the sky over New York, and I don't want to be chased by missiles. Then they must be able to see it. Li Feng patted the carriage, pointed to the metal palladium reactor on Stark's chest, and said, the expulsion spell on the RV can make ordinary people ignore the existence of the RV unless the other party is even a person with energy like you cannot see the RV once I activate the invisibility spell on the RV. Stark pointed in the direction he was going and signaled Li Feng to let the RV fly towards the company. He looked down at the reactor thoughtfully, and after a while he said, your invisibility is just optical invisibility, right? It can only avoid satellite scanning. But people sitting in front of thermal imaging and radar can also detect RVs. Li Feng shrugged helplessly and said, yes, this can be regarded as a shortcoming, but I am not afraid of being discovered. After all, I pay great attention to defense when modifying the RV. Even missiles cannot scratch my RV for a while. Stark touched his chin and said with a smile, if there were too many missiles, could you still use the magic to escape? By the way, what kind of magic did you use to get you from Afghanistan to New York? The portal. Li Feng saw what Stark was curious about, spread his hands with a helpless expression, and said, without the permission of the temple mage, I will not introduce the portal to you in detail. Stark thoughtfully said, so you are not the only mage on Earth, but a group of them? I am very curious, where are they usually? Why don't you come out and meet me? I can provide them with activity funds. Is it true that the lawyer is just like in the novel, and doing an experiment is no different than burning money? Li Feng knew what Stark was thinking, and said with a half-smile, they are busy silently guarding this world from being invaded by magical creatures from other worlds. As for the funds, even if your worth increases 10 times, you will still be the same in front of others. He is a poor beggar. This is not Li Feng's nonsense, but Li Feng has seen with his own eyes how rich Gu Yi is. Not to mention how long the building he lives in has a long history. Even the teacups he usually drinks tea with are antiques. How can you compare with others? After a while, the RV landed steadily on the rooftop of Stark Tower. As soon as Li Feng opened the door and followed Stark out of the RV, he suddenly noticed that someone seemed to be talking around him. Stark followed Li Feng's line of sight and saw nothing on the empty attic except a few satellite receivers. What's wrong? Nothing. Li Feng shook his head in confusion and said, let's go. Let me see what fun things you have in this rich man's office. When Stark walked into the company wearing refugee-like rags, you can imagine the commotion he made. This made Stark couldn't help complaining, can't you lend me some clothes? Even a coat? Li Feng shrugged. He didn't want to lend clothes to Stark. There were no ordinary clothes in Li Feng's wardrobe. They were all magic clothes that could change styles. In terms of Stark's strong curiosity, Li Feng could think with his toes that he had just lent his clothes to Stark, and in a blink of an eye, this guy sent his clothes to various inspections until he understood the magical clothes. Then until we build a mark model that can restrain Li Feng's ability. When Pepper Potts heard that her boss had appeared inexplicably in the company, she hurried to the opposite side of Stark with a shocked expression. Obviously, Pepper Potts had a lot to say, but for some reason he just said no. When he exited, he just looked at Stark with red eyes and biting his lip. Stark raised his brows, looked at Potts, whose eyes were slightly red and could hardly hold back his tears, and said, "My eyes are red. Is this what the boss is thinking about?" Potts smiled and shook his head, "No, I'm just glad I don't have to look for a job. I hate looking for a job." "Okay, your vacation is over," Stark pointed at Li Feng and said, "Help me entertain this guest and arrange the press conference." Potts looked at Li Feng doubtfully and said, "Are you sure you don't want to go to the hospital first? How did you suddenly show up at the company?" "On the plane." Hearing Potts mention the airplane, Stark seemed to have thought of something, pointed to the ceiling and said, "No one is allowed to go to the rooftop. Believe me, that thing is much scarier than the airplane and will ruin your outlook on life." Potts was stunned, not understanding what Stark meant by ruining 3 views, but seeing that Stark showed no signs of trauma, he had no choice but to pick up his phone and arrange a press conference. Stark, on the other hand, took advantage of the fact that there was still some time before the press conference, and took Li Feng into his office, opened his arms, made a welcoming gesture, and said, "How about it? Compared with your house, your home should be spacious." Li Feng sat on the sofa, minding his own business, and said contemptuously, "It's not as big as my locker, so I'm so proud of it." Stark's eyes twitched. How could he refute this? He had visited Li Feng's locker with his own eyes. Not to mention that his office couldn't compare. Even his home, which he originally thought was big enough, couldn't match the area of a locker. A little unconvinced, Stark said quietly, "One day I will crack your space expansion technology and create a teacup bigger than your locker." After a while, Potts walked to the office door carrying a new set of clothes, knocked on the door and said, "The press conference is ready. You can start after changing your clothes." Stark took the clothes, regardless of whether anyone at the scene wanted to see his figure, and said while changing clothes, "Austin, are you in the office or going downstairs with me? As long as I mention at the press conference that it was you who saved, I don't mind if your name appears on the front page tomorrow." Li Feng rolled his eyes at Stark and said, "Forget it, I want to be on the front page and I need your help. It's not like you don't know that I wish no one in the world knew me, otherwise why would I run to the desert? Really? I like sand. As the saying goes, people rely on their clothes, and they rely on their gold." Stark, who put on new clothes, waved to Li Feng energetically and said, "Okay, when the press conference is over, you can show me the gadget on your neck." Li Feng shrugged indifferently and said, "As long as you abide by the rules, it doesn't matter even if you bring your wife, Ms. Potts, with you." Now Stark has lived in a cave for 3 months. Although he understands Potts' position in his heart, he has not confessed his feelings to Potts now. After hearing Li Feng's teasing, Stark glanced at Potts and hurriedly rushed to the press conference. With a slightly embarrassed look on his face, Potts glanced at Li Feng and hurriedly followed Stark. Chapter 100 Traveling Through Time. On the way to the press conference, Stark whispered to Potts, "Help me check Austin's information." Potts was stunned, subconsciously looked back at Stark's office, and whispered, "Didn't you say he saved you?" Stark nodded slightly and said, "But he was too good to me. I always felt that he had other requests, and." While thinking about why Li Feng didn't take him back to New York immediately but insisted on arousing his interest in magic, Stark shrugged and said, "And I only knew him for less than half a day. And I didn't even know his real name. I'm not sure if it's Austin." Potts nodded slightly and said, "Okay, you're the boss, you have the final say, I'll help you when the press conference is over." "No," Stark shook his head and interrupted Potts, "Go now, I want to get all the information about Austin by the end of the press conference." After that, Stark quickened his pace and walked towards the press conference, while Potts took a deep breath and turned into a room, took out his mobile phone to contact Stark's personal butler Jarvis, asking it to help investigate Li Feng's information. After all, manual data collection is not as fast as artificial intelligence. After the call, Potts hurried to the press conference, hoping to see Stark talking handsomely in front of the reporters, and at the same time praying that Stark would not cause any trouble. Although the announcement of Stark's return press conference was a bit hasty, the protagonist is the famous Stark, so there are many reporters coming. In addition, there are also many people who come to satisfy their curiosity, including Carlson, who is mixed in with the reporters. In fact, Carlson was quite confused when he received the news that Stark had returned to the country and appeared in the company's press conference. He wondered how Stark, who was missing in Afghanistan, could bypass the surveillance at the airport station and appear in the company. Could it be that Stark flew here on a missile he built? Or was Stark actually imprisoned in New York? So they ate sand in the desert for 3 months and got nothing? When Stark announced in front of reporters that he was going to close the weapons manufacturing department, Potts, who rushed over, opened her mouth in surprise and looked at Stark in disbelief. Her only thought was that her boss should be sent to the hospital for a brain check. A company that produces high-end weapons closed its weapons manufacturing department? What else could this be but a brain seizure? Carlson also looked at Stark in surprise when he saw Potts appear, but now was not the time to solve the problem of why Stark closed the weapons manufacturing department. Carlson walked quickly to Potts, handed her a SHIELD business card, and said, "Ms. Potts, I am Agent Carlson from the Strategic Homeland Defense Attack and Logistics Support Agency. I want to know about Stark's disappearance." Potts was stunned when she heard the full name of SHIELD. She wanted to see the business card Carlson handed to her. Such a long department name, can a small business card be printed enough? "I know. Many departments of the Department of Defense and the CIA have come to me for this matter, but Mr. Stark suddenly appeared in the company half an hour ago, and stayed in the office with an Asian youth as soon as he came back, so I don't know the details." "Asian?" Carlson frowned and asked, "Can you tell me what this Asian youth looks like?" Potts glanced at Carlson, thinking that Carlson was a national department after all, and might have information about Li Feng. He hesitated and said, "I only know his name is Austin." "Do you have any information about him?" Hearing Li Feng's name coming out of Potts' mouth, Carlson's first reaction was to let Stark go to the SHIELD base for a psychiatrist to check whether Stark's closure of the weapons manufacturing department was caused by Li Feng's hypnosis. "If you mean Austin, the Asian with a small belly. I think we have his information. He is very dangerous," Carlson said as he took out his mobile phone and dialed the number, saying, "Sir, Austin has appeared and has contacted Stark. I suspect that Stark has been hypnotized by Austin. I need a team of experts to go to the press conference." Carlson turned his head to look at Potts and asked, "Is Austin still in the office?" Potts was a little terrified and overwhelmed when he heard that Stark was hypnotized, and couldn't help but want to drag his boss into the hospital for examination. Hearing Carlson's question, Potts covered his mouth and whispered, "Yes, he is still in Stark's office." Carlson nodded and asked on the phone, "Sir, do you need me to contact Austin?" On the other end of the phone, Fury recalled that he had suspected that Li Feng was a commercial spy, and he didn't know where he stole the technology to resurrect corpses. If Li Feng was really a commercial spy, he was now in a weapons manufacturing company. Who knows if Li Feng would steal weapons information? Fury ordered without thinking, "Find Austin as soon as possible. I want to know his purpose of approaching Stark. Also, let Stark check whether the information in the building was stolen by Austin." After thinking for a while, Fury continued, "The team searching for Stark in Afghanistan will continue, but the target will be changed." After hanging up the phone, Carlson touched the gun on his back and said, "Ms. Potts, can you take me to see Austin?" Potts hesitated for a few seconds. Since her boss returned to the company, Potts knew that Stark positioned Li Feng as a friend. Even if he did not trust this friend now, it was not appropriate to let an agent from an unknown department take away Stark's friend. Carlson seemed to see Potts's hesitation and said, "I won't take Austin away. I just want to ask a few questions in person." "Of course." Carlson turned his head and looked at Stark, and said, "You can tell your boss about taking me to see Austin." Potts thought for a while and said, "I want the company's security department to send someone to follow you." Carlson nodded slightly and smiled, "No problem." When Potts led several security guards and Carlson to the office, Li Feng was sitting at Stark's desk playing computer games, playing the card game that came with the computer. Due to the design of the office, Li Feng, who was sitting in front of the computer, was facing the office door. Because of this, Carlson, who pushed the door in, subconsciously felt that Li Feng was stealing information such as weapon design drawings in the computer. After all, he couldn't see what was displayed on the computer screen. Drawing a gun and aiming at Carlson, who was done in one go, he shouted, "Mr. Austin, thief is not a real profession." Li Feng glanced at Carlson, and then looked at the half-played cards on the computer screen. "What did I steal?" "Steal the cards in the computer? How do you steal this thing? Come and teach me." Carlson?" I remember your name, isn't the efficiency of Lu Dan too high? I just returned to New York and you found me. Potts heard something from the conversation between Carlson and Austin, and walked quickly to Li Feng's side and looked at the computer. There was nothing on the computer interface except a stand-alone card game. Potts felt that he was deceived. He looked at Carlson with a bit of displeasure and said, "Mr. Agent, please put down your gun. Otherwise I will ask the security to ask you to leave." Coulson could feel that Potts was not joking, so he had to put down his gun and said, "Ms. Potts, let me remind you that Mr. Austin is a hypnotist, and he can hypnotize you with just a snap of his fingers." Before Coulson finished speaking, he heard Stark's teasing voice behind him, "You actually need to snap your fingers to hypnotize people." Stark glanced at Coulson and stretched out his hand to signal the security to take irrelevant people out of the office. This is his office, and it's not time to have a party yet. Isn't it crowded in his office with so many people? After Coulson was taken out of the office, Stark closed the door and walked up to Li Feng and said, "I always thought you could hypnotize people with just a look. After all, that's how wizards are described in novels and movies, right, Mr. Li Feng?" Li Feng smiled, stood up and said, "It seems you have found out all my secrets. What did you find?" Potts was a little confused. Stark didn't seem to be joking when he talked about the magician. He even used novels and movies to affirm Li Feng's profession. Obviously, Potts felt that the Asian youth in front of him might be the same as the legendary magician in some abilities. At least now she believed what Coulson said about Li Feng being able to hypnotize people easily. Stark shrugged. How could he find out all the information about Li Feng in such a short time? Impossible, so Stark did not answer Li Feng's question, but asked, "When will you take me to see your little toy?" Li Feng scratched his head. He couldn't guess what Stark was thinking, but, who cares? Li Feng took off the time converter from his neck and smiled at Potts, "Anytime, do you need to bring Potts with you? This is a rare opportunity, don't miss it if you pass by." Stark touched the tip of his nose and seemed a little hesitant, "Is it dangerous?" Understanding what Stark was worried about, Li Feng shrugged and said, "Walking on the road will be hit by a car for no reason, but as long as you follow the rules, I guarantee that this is safer than walking on the road, and it will be an unforgettable trip." Stark raised his eyebrows and said, "This metaphor is really accurate, so I like to drive on the street to make sure no car hits me." After thinking about it, maybe Stark said that he would not take Potts with him this time for safety reasons, or he was confident that he could build a time machine in the future, and when Potts wanted to play time travel in the future, he could use technology to take Potts through time travel. Thinking of this, Stark stretched out his hand to signal Li Feng to start the performance. On the side, Potts, who was confused, didn't understand what the two were talking about at all. She just wanted to know whether Stark was hypnotized. Potts said in a firm tone, "I want you to go to the hospital now." Before Potts finished speaking, she looked at Li Feng inexplicably as he took out something from his shoulder bag and put it on Stark, and then put the converter chain around Stark's neck. Just when Potts felt a little puzzled and wanted to ask what was going on, she saw Li Feng gently turn the time converter, and then she looked at Stark, who had just returned to the company in horror and disappeared in front of her eyes. End of the video. Like, subscribe and hit the bell icon for more stories.